Thank you, everyone. It's 5:30, so we'll get underway because we have a long agenda to get through and a lot of speakers. Just a little bit of housekeeping at the start. Can I ask you to please note the fire exits? There's one over there and one over there. Can I ask that all mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent? And to remind everyone that an audio recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast live, and it will also be available on the council website afterwards. So when speaking, for everyone, if you please, for councillors to switch your microphone on to start and off to finish. For all speakers, there's a microphone on that table there. That's just on all the time. You don't have to do anything. And I'll call you one by one. So first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
The apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Trott, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Britton, Councillor Burgess, Peter Burgess, Christine Costin, and apologies from Louise Potter, David Skip, and Belinda Waters. Thank you. Thank you.
And item 2, to approve as correct the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of September. Can I have everyone's agreement that they're correct?
My apologies, Chairman.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Lindsay sent his apologies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep, so minutes of the meeting, to everyone agree they're correct. And I'll sign them later. Thank you. Item 3, do we have any declarations of interest from members? No. Okay. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. I'd like to remind members that that the Chairman's Civic Service will be taking place this Sunday, 9th of October, at St Mary's Church in Horsham. The service starts at 6 p.m. and guests are asked to arrive for 5:45. This promises to be a special occasion and a large number of councillors, dignitaries and others have been invited. There's still time to secure a reserved place for you and a guest, or to attend as part of the general congregation. And there'll also be a reception to follow. So if you would like to come, could you please advise Ian Dewar beforehand. Thank you very much. And then the other thing to say is just that a reminder that this is a long agenda tonight and we have an unusually high number of speakers. So if it looks like it's going to run on late, we will be looking to take a short comfort break at a convenient moment, probably around 7 o'clock. Okay, and I'd now like to welcome to this meeting all the members of to the public and the speakers here tonight. I'll be calling you at the relevant time to come forward and use the microphone I indicated earlier, and I will tell you each time how long you have to speak. If you do overrun, I'll remind you and ask you to finish your remarks as soon as possible. For the benefit of our visitors, could officers now please introduce themselves?
Nick Pettifer, Senior Planning Officer.
I'm Guy Rest, the Applications Team Leader.
Emma Clark's Head of Development Management and Building Control.
Michelle Hock, Legal Services.
And Liz Fenwick, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 5. We'll now consider reports from the Heads of Development and Building Control. Firstly, just to draw attention to appeals, which are just for noting. And then item 6 is the first substantive item. This is linked to item 7, and we'll consider the two together, as Emma will explain when she makes her presentation.
Thank you. Yes, this presentation covers items 6 and 7 of the agenda, which relate to a parcel of land accessed off Coolhurst Close in Monk's Gate. For context, Nuthurst Road is to the north of the site and Brighton Road to the east. So these are some views towards the application site, which is located beyond the timber gates and comprises an area of paddock. And this is an existing view along Coolhurst Close, showing the existing houses there. So the site benefits from outline planning permission for 5 dwellings, with item 6, the reserve matters application, providing the detail of the development. So the layout would reflect that existing on Coolhurst Close and would provide a semi-detached pair of properties in the northwestern corner and 3 detached dwellings elsewhere on the site. The scale and appearance of the dwellings would sufficiently reflect existing development on Coolhurst Close and is considered acceptable in this location. The layout would provide off-street parking for each dwelling, as you can see, the 2 parking spaces at the front, and a garage in the case of the detached dwellings. The Highway Authority has advised there will be a shortfall of 2 visitor parking spaces on the site, but that this could be accommodated on existing roads. It's not therefore anticipated that displaced parking would be an issue. In respect of neighbouring amenity, attention is drawn to paragraph 6.13 of the report for item 6, which erroneously refers to plot 4 as forming a bungalow. So you can see location of plot 4 in the bottom left corner, and at the bottom slide, plot 4 is in fact a 2-storey dwelling house. The remainder of the assessment in paragraph 6.13 is though considered accurate, and the spacing and layout of the dwellings is considered sufficient to ensure no unacceptable harm on neighbouring amenity. The existing outline planning permission was determined before the issue of water neutrality, and water neutrality therefore falls to be considered as part of this current reserve matters application. To address water neutrality, private borehole and treatment works is proposed, and this forms item 7 of the agenda. The location of the borehole is shown by the red hatching on the east of the reserve matters site, as identified by the black arrow. The Environment Agency have confirmed that the borehole would take water from a different aquifer to the Sussex North supply zone, and extraction would not therefore in principle impact on the River Arun catchment. The application includes reports setting out that a borehole at a depth of around 80 metres should provide a water supply far in excess of what would be required to accommodate the development. The quantity of water provided by the borehole not therefore anticipated to be an issue. In terms of the quality of the water being provided, the proposal also includes a treatment works. The specification of the treatment works is not yet known, as further water sampling and testing would be needed once the borehole has been sunk. To address this, conditions are recommended to prevent any development on the site other than the borehole taking place until it's been demonstrated that the water can be treated to meet relevant standards. These conditions also impose requirements for continual testing and maintenance, and these will also be secured for a 106 agreement, which would cover items 6 and 7 and effectively link them together. So the key point of the recommendation is that the development couldn't take place until the quantity and quality of the water from the borehole has been proven to be sufficient. And if it's not sufficient, the reserve matters development and the housing couldn't be implemented. A further consideration is that we're not able to prevent a mains water connection for the proposed housing. It is though possible to require any mains connection only be used temporarily in an emergency, and this is sought to be secured by conditions 2 and 10 of the recommendation. These conditions are both enforceable and can be monitored, and it's important to note that Natural England has raised no objections to the approach taken to address water neutrality. So the end result of items 6 and 7 is that, subject to a series of conditions, the reserve matters application can be considered water neutral through the provision of a private borehole. It's therefore recommended that items 6 and 7 be approved as set out in the reports.
Thank you. Now we have a number of speaks on this. As explained, we're taking items 6 and 7 together. So where a speaker is registered to speak on both items, they get double the time in effect. So the first speaker is Jane McLeod, and you have 4 minutes, and this is an objection.
Apologies. Hello, councillors. As a representative from the Monksgate Residents Association, I'm speaking for the majority of residents in Monksgate. As you know, you are considering two applications relating to the same site, and I would like to comment on both. Despite the disappointment that the site has been granted outline planning for more properties than suggested by the neighbourhood plan, it is inevitable that some development will occur at some point. Firstly, in relation to the reserved matters, I would urge you to adjust a proposed condition to insist that the external lighting scheme is in keeping with Coolhurst Close in that there are no street lights. Also, that all of the lights on the properties are downlighters only and not lanterns. This will serve to mitigate the detrimental impact on local nocturnal wildlife. In addition, we would request the condition the developer and builder are required to make good any and all damage caused to the private roadway Coolhurst Close during the development. As raised previously, residents are very concerned about the overall height of the development and would ask for a new condition that the elevation of the land be reduced before development to reduce the overbearing nature of the proposed properties. Those comments I've just made are only relevant should you support the developer's scheme to circumnavigate the spirit of Natural England's desire to protect the South East from over-abstraction of groundwater. The planning officers are very reasonably conditioned that the borehole be drilled prior to any house building to test the quality of the water drawn. Can I ask that that condition be enhanced to ensure that the aquifer be proven to have an adequate supply of water to support these properties for time immemorial? This issue about water availability has been raised by the developer's own experts. With regards to the water treatment plant application itself, the Monksgate Residents Association would urge you to decline the water treatment plant for the following key reasons. Irrespective of size, the plant will be outside of the neighbourhood plan site boundary. The plant would effectively industrialise the development site and require extensive maintenance and review by the public who buy the properties. This would not be safe. The treatment plant would adversely affect the livelihood of the adjoining arable farm. It is incomprehensible that the farmer should have to reduce the amount of usable farmland, especially at a time when we need our farmers more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Denise Harbour, also objection, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My objection is to the DC 221178, the borehole. I object to this application because the location of the borehole is outside the neighbourhood plan for development and is adjacent to agricultural land. It may restrict agriculture and create a precedent for future development. Neither the borehole itself nor the development it's intended to serve is water neutral. The applicant has failed to prove that the borehole will provide an adequate supply of water in perpetuity for the 5 houses it's intended to serve. As the borehole prognosis supplied as part of the application shows, the report states that until a borehole is dug, this can never be certain. The borehole system will have mains backup to fill the tank in the event of failure. Thus, the system is not water neutral. And the houses will have an emergency connection to the mains, indicating that the development is not water neutral. Access to the borehole is through Coolhurst Close and via Nuthurst Road, although the borehole is located at Great Ventnors Farm, the property of the applicant, which has its own access. Clearly, the applicant doesn't wish to have the inconvenience of construction and maintenance traffic, but is quite happy for this to inconvenience Monksgate residents and those who use Nuthurst Road and Coolhurst Close. It's evident to me that this borehole application is merely an attempt to overcome water neutrality requirement for a new development, rather than a serious attempt to achieve water neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Alan Harbour. You also have 2 minutes and also an objection.
Good afternoon. My objection actually follows very closely to what you just heard and is built around the question of water neutrality. My objection is water neutrality requirements are not met. The application is made on condition as a borehole and water treatment house to serve the development may be adequate. The borehole prognosis report states that until a borehole is dug, this can never be certain. The position of Horsham District Council on water neutrality is that if an application cannot demonstrate a water neutrality is reasonably achievable, this will mean that the development will not meet the requirements of section 63 of the Habitat Regulations, and the application could not be determined positively. The developer has not demonstrated that water neutrality is reasonably achievable. The proposed borehole has a backup system to fill the tank from the mains. Houses on the development will have an emergency connection to rainwater. There is no indication of the criteria for emergency. Who will decide what is an emergency, when and for how long the houses may take water from the mains? And what about the adequacy of the borehole? That needs to be monitored as well. Externally, we need external monitoring of the borehole itself. The connection means that this development is not water neutral. It is evident the borehole is merely an attempt to get around the water neutrality requirement, which is there for a purpose. Horsham is an area of extreme water stress. Developers should not be able to compromise the public good for their own gain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the next speaker, which is Jane Mercer. There's an objection and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, councillors. My name is Jay Mercer. I'm a resident of Monksgate. I'm speaking to object to both these applications on the grounds of overdevelopment and thus a lack of an acceptable plan for water neutrality. They are a classic example of planning creep. Nuthurst Parish was one of the first in Horsham to achieve a successful neighbourhood plan, heavily supported by residents at referendum and agreed by the planning inspector. This brought a significant contribution to housing numbers, of which around a third were in Monksgate. This is one of the sites included, and when the outline application was considered, the main point of discussion was over density. The plan suggested 2 dwellings consistent with the rest of the site, whereas the applicant wanted 5, an additional 3. After much debate, the higher number was what was agreed through the vote of the then chair. And now we have 2 linked proposals seeking to develop a further portion of land in the countryside outside the built-up area. Officers remind us, and I quote, the proposal must be essential to its countryside location. Further, must not lead either individually or cumulatively to a significant increase in the overall level of activity in the countryside, and must protect, conserve and enhance key features and characteristics of the landscape character in which it is located. How on earth does a new water borehole and pumping station fulfill these criteria? We're told, again in the report, that the existing site boundary, quote, does not have the capacity to deliver this piece of infrastructure, and therefore a small extension of the site into this adjacent paddock is required. Actually, it's not. That's the planning creep. What's needed is a revision to the outline plans to accommodate the pumping station, maybe by reducing the number or changing the mix of dwellings. Therefore, I ask you to refuse both these applications on grounds of overdevelopment and thus a lack of an acceptable plan for water neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the next, this is the applicant, Diana Miles, and you have 4 minutes because you're registered for both items. Diana Miles?
No, I'm not Diana Miles. Don Burstow, may I go first and followed by Diana Miles? It should be the order you have.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I firstly emphasise this site is part of an allocated site within the neighbourhood plan, which was supported by all of the local residents, as been pointed out by you. The site has already created 10 lovely houses occupied by a number of the people here, and there's a great credit to the community. There's no reason why these additional 5 houses shouldn't be exactly the same. Outline consent has already been granted 3 years ago, and the plans that were approved are exactly the same as you see now in terms of the types of house, the locations of the buildings, the access and the scale. It is not different, and approval has already been granted for that. There are a number of objections that you've read, and I'll just quickly mention affordable housing. One of the objections from the parish is that there's no affordable housing. There are off-site affordable payments on this whole site in excess of £650,000, which amounts to your 35% requirement. Another point made is the question of access. Yes, Coolhurst Close is a private road, but when all of the houses in Coolhurst Close were sold, it was made quite clear that there was a further development to come on this site, and it was made quite clear in the documentation that there were full rights of way and rights for services over those roads. The access to the borehole will also be over Coolhurst Close, and these new 5 houses will have just as much right to use Coolhurst Close as the 10 houses that are already built there. That there is no difference. And these 5 houses will have to contribute on exactly the same basis to the maintenance of Coolhurst Close as the existing houses already do. This Reserve Matters application would have come to you a long time ago if it weren't for the water neutrality. And my daughter and I and Nichols, the borehole specialist, have been working with your officers, with the Environment Agency, with Natural England, for the last year to come up with a workable solution. And all of those agree that this is a workable solution, subject to the conditions that have been recommended. This is not an attempt to get round water neutrality. That really is unfair. It's an attempt to comply with water neutrality and to meet exactly what Natural England have asked for, which is why, as you will see, there is no objection from Natural England, as long as the conditions we've accepted are applied. Can I finally deal with the point about this being outside of the allocated site? This is a small provision that to provide a utility, an essential utility for a consented development. Your planning officers have come to the conclusion that that is acceptable. And I would just draw your attention to the fact that in order to accommodate Coolhurst Close and this site, overhead power cables had to be removed. And in order to do that, a new substation had to be constructed outside of the allocated site on the front of my land on the boundary of AA281. Not one objection was raised by the residents or by the parish council to that essential utility, which was outside of the site. The allocated site. That this, I would suggest, is really no different. I will now leave it for my daughter, who's been dealing more specifically with the borehole issues, and the gentleman from Nichols, the borehole experts, to give you a little further information as to just how that is proposed to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diana Miles, you have 4 minutes as well.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Diana Miles, and I am the daughter of Don and also director of Beatrice and May Homes. I specifically going to be talking about how we've approached water neutrality. We did first actually look at offsetting as an option, and we went quite a long way with that, and then found that for various reasons that wasn't possible. As my father said, we've then worked for more than a year now on looking at the borehole. And having completed a year of research, I can absolutely appreciate some of the comments and concerns that have been raised, because it obviously is a more complex solution than just attaching to the mains water supply. But I've also learned that it really isn't uncommon, and that there are thousands of private boreholes across the UK, and it is becoming a really common solution to having a fully sustainable home. So with regard to Natural England, 2 comments I want to bring up about what they have said. They've absolutely clearly said that the source of water we are using is not linked to any groundwater supplies that are unrestrained, and therefore it is acceptable. They also have stringently, as have the planners, said that we need a sufficient, robust legal agreement in place to ensure the emergency backup, which has been mentioned, is absolutely only for emergency, and that our water will be treated to the right standards. So to meet this, there are clear conditions that have been set, and that if we got approval today, it would only be a resolution to grant subject to the 106, and that covers all of those legal requirements. It also covers off concern. I also wanted to cover off some concerns around maintenance and testing that have been raised. The application will have a pre-commencement condition that requires a full private water supply management plan to be submitted and approved in writing. This maintenance plan will form an initial contract between Beatrice and May and Nichols Borehole during the build phase. That contract will then transfer to the management company of the 5 houses when they're sold. Directors of those houses will be the owners of those houses, but we will also appoint a managing agent who will manage the contract with Nichols Borehole. This is exactly the same as the current contract that Coolhurst Close have today with an independent Calagas supplier, and they have that managed by a managing agent as well. So while no figure can be placed on the total maintenance contract, it is not anticipated that this cost would be any more than a yearly water bill when split between the houses. Finally, on concerns of water quality, I'm going to let Mark from Nichols deal with, how we're going to approach water quality. But I do want to just agree with some of the comments that have been made and will be made, no doubt, in the next speaker, that we don't know our exact water conditions yet, and we won't know that until we dig. But the cost of digging is really expensive. And for a site this size with no full planning in place, we needed, planning in place before we do that. So we absolutely welcome the practical condition that is proposed, that only with approval today, we must first dig the borehole, take our exact water samples, demonstrate that our system works, and only then can we start looking at building houses. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, who is going to talk a little bit more about the technical approach and hopefully alleviate some of those concerns.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mark Alwyn or Alwyn, not sure how you pronounce it. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm a technical director for Nichols Boreholes, and I've been invited here today to hopefully give you some technical insight on the proposal of the borehole and some confidence that we as a company are technically able and experienced to provide a water solution for the development in question. I personally have had 18 years experience in the industry. We've drilled countless boreholes in the local area and have a real wealth of local experience, understanding of private water systems, from single homes to large developments. Our largest system supplies 150 homes without the benefit of a mains backup. So we're confident that we can provide technical solutions to make this work on a practical level. We understand the local geology here and the likely filtration requirements. We have multiple boreholes within a few miles, following the 8281 corridor from Calfold up to Mannings Heath, used for irrigation purposes and also for private water supplies for drinking. So we're very confident that there is water available in the aquifer. There is no guarantee, but looking at the local boreholes that we've worked with, we're very happy that there's a strong, reliable supplies available. With regard to the protection of the source and the design of the borehole, we're very experienced in drilling in this geology, and we would offer a solution that would combine bentonite seal on the top to stop any surface contamination going down, raised lockable cover over the wellhead to ensure there's no tampering. We'd be drilling to a depth of somewhere between 65 and 80 meters. So that in itself forms pretty amazing protection from any surface contamination or any risks of that nature. But also part of the protection of the source is the source protection zone, which helps to try and manage what goes on around the wellhead. Now, it's not necessarily enforceable, but it is there to advise and to demonstrate that we take the protection of the source seriously. I've done a site survey and can see from the local topography that we've got protection from surface runoff with a ditch arrangement that would further protect from any surface ingress of contaminants. With regard to the water quality, although again it can't be guaranteed until the well's drilled, I do know what to expect because of the local systems that we've already got. And I'm proposing, as wherever possible, chemical-free solution to the filtration. No chemicals stored on site, as natural as possible using aeration and contact media. These are tried and tested systems that are tested within a couple of miles of this development. And I anticipate there to be iron, manganese, and a pH balance required, all of which is bread and butter to us. It's what we do every day. We also offer full support packages, servicing, maintenance, technical support. We've got CATAG qualified engineers who are allowed to take water samples on behalf of local authorities, and indeed we do so in various authorities in the local area. We liaise closely with local authorities, with the environmental health officers, and are well used to ensuring that we provide potable supply 24/7, 365. We've suggested some options to keep some spare parts in stock, pumps, etc. So any emergency situation can be dealt with in a timely fashion. And we have time-served engineers available all the time to ensure that that does happen. Hopefully that's given you some technical insight into what we're offering, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And now the last speaker, Councillor Owen Hydes from Nuthurst Parish Council. Again, you're registered for both items, so you have a total of 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, councillors. I can assure you I won't take up 10 minutes of your time. You would get bored listening to me. I've basically got one very important point to make. Anyway, councillors, I'm sure everybody is getting rather fed up with water neutrality and how it's holding up developments. These two applications are an attempt to hasten up this development for 5 houses. They propose sinking a borehole, hoping to find enough water that can be made drinkable. So what has Natural England said about this proposal? And I quote, merely that HDC is the competent authority and must have robust evidence that the proposal is satisfactory. Nothing more helpful than that. But councillors, please note that the applicants have not provided HDC with the robust evidence required by Natural England. Consequently, none of us know with any confidence that there is enough water now and that the aquifer will not dry up in 6 months down the line. These two applications are merely resting on a wing and a prayer that sufficient water might be forthcoming. Even the applicant's consultant says, when talking about whether there is sufficient water, and I quote, until a borehole is dug, this can never be certain. Why does the consultant say this? Simply because the developers have not yet dug the borehole and provided robust evidence that it can supply enough water and that it will not dry up over the ensuing months. This drying up issue is not even mentioned in any of the reports. Quite a bad omission, I think, because aquifers do dry up. So why haven't the developers first dug the borehole to provide robust evidence that it's all going to work? Pages into the report, we find the single sentence, and I quote, it is not viable for the drilling of the borehole to commence until the applicant has more certainty that planning permission will be approved. This sentence is an assertion. It's never, ever queried. It's putting the cart before the horse. Being in business means taking risks. Unless the developer can take this risk of sinking a borehole and providing hard evidence, no one can ever be satisfied that there is indeed enough water for these 5 houses, and I mean in perpetuity. If there isn't enough water, what then? The houses can't be occupied. The report just says that, yet empty houses will be a huge loss making for the developer. Or will the houses simply be allowed to draw water from the mains? In which case, they certainly won't be water neutral. Councillors, what a mess this is. All the many conditions before you can never make this mess acceptable. As I said, it's the cart before the horse position. Or to put it another way, using Natural England's words, there is no robust evidence before us that this proposal will work. So the Parish Council concludes that this decision should be delayed until the developers invest some money, sink a borehole, and provide us with proof that there is enough water now, and it's unlikely to dry up in the foreseeable future, and that it can be treated to meet the stringent drinking water standards. Therefore, councillors, please delay a decision on these 2 planning applications until the developer has provided that robust proof. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I can throw this open. Sorry, officer's going to reply to.
Thanks. Yeah, just to pick up on a few points there raised speakers. Just to confirm, the extent of the housing is consistent with the neighbourhood plan allocation and the outline permission. And of course, also confirm that the outline permission is subject to the Section 96 agreement, which secures us a contribution to off-site affordable housing based on the square meterage of the dwellings being proposed. In terms of the location of the borehole, it is outside of a neighbourhood plan allocation, but I think it's difficult to argue that a borehole isn't appropriate in a countryside location. I think you tend to find boreholes in the countryside. In this case, the borehole would be seen directly alongside the housing development, and it's not an isolated location. It's got development around it, and it's not the edge of countryside either. So I think that incursion in the red hatching isn't in itself causing any harm, which would warrant a refusal of planning permission. In terms of external lighting, the scheme was amended as part of the application process to remove all street lighting. And what's now proposed by the green circles are wall-mounted lanterns to the front, and the blue circles show downward lighting to the back rear elevations. And condition 11 of the recommendation prevents any future lighting being installed beyond that shown on this plan. So this lighting has been reviewed by the council's ecologist, who's raised no objection in terms of the impact on bats primarily. In terms of the need for robust evidence of the borehole, the recommendation isn't disagreeing with that suggestion. It's taking the view that we can secure that evidence by condition, and that a planning permission is necessary in the first instance for us to secure the details we need to confirm that the quantity and quality of the water being provided by the borehole is sufficient, both in terms of water neutrality and public health and the provision of drinking water. And the combination of both items 6 and 7, the conditions therein and the 106 agreement, we think provides enough safeguards to ensure no development other than the borehole can take place until we've been satisfied that the robust evidence is there to demonstrate the borehole achieves what it sets out to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to go to the local member now, which is Councillor Bradman.
Chairman, thank you. And I would start by saying that this development has made an enormous amount of work for both officers and applicant alike, and I thank them all for the care and attention that they've given to trying to resolve the many issues associated with these 2 applications, which go hand in hand. Now, I'm sorry to say that I find myself at odds with our parish council and residents on this application, But I can't see any reason really why permission for these 5 houses should not be granted subject to 1 or 2 alterations. As we've heard, outline permission was granted by this committee in 2019. Local residents were opposed to this extension to the existing scheme of Coolhurst Close. I supported the residents and I spoke against it, but it was passed. And one way or another, these 5 homes will at some stage be built. Objections to this application, it seems to me, apart from the borehole, are much the same as they were when it was passed in 2019. It's overdevelopment, parking, and there are drainage and sewage problems also in Monksgate, and I uphold some of those objections. I know this will be very disruptive for Coolhurst Close and those living on the Brighton Road, and I'm particularly sorry for the Brighton Road residents because they're suddenly going to back onto houses instead of open countryside. The aspect of lights has been addressed, and I take on board what an earlier speaker said, and can we please make sure they are downlighters, not just lights stuck on the wall. We don't need additional street lighting, etc. in the countryside. We're used to living in the dark. And I just want to think for a moment about the car parking. And it seems to me, with a little bit of manoeuvring with the existing properties and the plans, a bit of on-street parking could be included. I think it's quite feasible that the 2 larger houses could have more than 2 cars per household as their family homes. And we certainly do not want any more parking on the Nuthurst Road, where we already have 2 long wheelbase vans parked right opposite the entrance to Coolhurst Close on many occasions. They're very dangerous because they're so near the junction of the 281. And so I don't want us to see cars drifting out onto Nuthurst Road for parking instead of on the site. I can't comment on the sewage and drainage problems really because I know nothing about sewage. But I do know, I have heard that there are to be alterations to the plant servicing Monksgate, and I don't know if the planning officer would be kind enough to comment on that. But what I do know for certain is that at times the Nuthurst Road floods, and currently there are always maintenance vehicles parked at the sewage plant at Monksgate. So if officers could please address the car parking and uplatches on the sewage plant, I would be grateful. Now, under pre-commencement conditions, it states that the management plan, as approved, shall be for the lifetime of the development. Well, if we assume to say for argument's sake that these houses are still standing in 100 years' time, surely we're not saying that this water neutrality issue will still be with us then. I think it needs rewording to say something along the lines of until such times as the water neutrality issue is resolved. Because in 10 or 15 years' time, we may well have a new reservoir, and then this means that providing water would be redundant. And so everything associated with this borehole and this means of providing water could be removed and returned to virgin land. If you could answer those questions, and I'll come on to the borehole. Thank you.
Yeah, so to start with parking, at the moment, condition 6 of the recommendation on item 6 essentially requires development to take place in accordance with this plan on the screen. We could amend that to prevent occupation of the dwellings until a revised parking scheme has been submitted to and approved in writing, with the intention that it would provide more off-street parking within the front curtilages. The reality is you'd lose some soft landscaping, but if the preference is that parking is more important, that could be secured through an amended wording for condition 6.
Well, I'm not saying it's more important, but it is obviously important.
Yeah. So I think if the recommendation,
and can you also please confirm that the road width going through these 5 new homes is actually wide enough for a car to be parked by the curb and for vehicles to still get round? Because some of the roads that we have approved in the past, such as in Crawbridge Heath, it's almost too difficult to actually pass each other.
Yeah, I think the best approach is to amend the wording for condition 6 to require details of parking to be submitted and approved in writing prior to what we usually do prior to occupation of the dwellings, basically, so that nothing could be occupied until the parking's been agreed. And that would have to come in as part of an improved details application once revised details are available.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of drainage, condition 6 of the original outline application requires details to be submitted to approved in writing. And we can add that as an informative one to the current application to remind them that the details need to come in. And as part of that, we'd consult our drainage engineer to make sure there's no risk of flooding to adjoining properties and land.
What about the sewage plant?
Yeah, the drainage condition will be surface water and foul. So
Sorry?
the drainage condition would cover surface water and foul sewage. So it would include the details of any changes to the existing plant and infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so and the in perpetuity requirement.
Yes,
So at the moment, we can't put a timeline on when water neutrality will no longer be an issue. So we are requiring it to be in perpetuity. But if in 10, 15, 20 years time, there's no longer a need for the borehole and the properties could be served by mains water, it would be entirely open to the homeowners to apply to vary the relevant conditions to remove the 106 and remove the need for the borehole. But we can't put a time figure on it, so it is in perpetuity at the moment.
okay, I accept that, thank you. We're just turning to the borehole, and I've done this separately because they are two separate applications, although they're intertwined. I know again that everybody has spent an awful lot of time working on this with all the different authorities. And I wish that these two applications could have waited until such time as we had a statement from Natural England addressing the issue of water shortage and what is to be done about it. However, I accept that in this case, the developer has tried to resolve the issue on site. I would like to say that I'm not at all keen on these flexible development boundaries. And this application takes the borehole and the housing outside of the agreed development area. But I also accept this is not the first time this has happened. And in fact, it happened in your ward, didn't it, just a few weeks ago. I can't help thinking that we're going backwards with this water problem, because we now need aerated taps and boreholes. It's ironic, really, because Nathurst and Lower Beeding Ward is littered with ancient wells and decommissioned wells. And I hear what people are saying about the access through Coolhurst Close, with it being a private road, but that I think is a legal matter, not a planning matter. And I think the idea that they could go through anywhere else, I mean, it's just not workable. You couldn't possibly have construction vehicles going in and out to this site from the Brighton Road through the landowner's property. I mean, that's just not feasible. I wouldn't have thought. It's on a corner as well. And I'm not happy about the way we've got this switch over to the mains water. And I'm probably being very thick. And I can tell you, I could write what I know about water on a postage stamp. All I know about it is I turn the tap on and it comes out. But I'm not very happy about the way we have this switch over. I think officers will need to think a bit more about the monitoring of this. And can officers please tell me, and this is a stupid question, I know, if there is a main switch in the treatment plant that would be switched over to mains water, or whether it's in the individual houses so that a resident would have the opportunity to just go and switch it on themselves. And I would also like it confirmed that an outside specialist management company would be taking responsibility for the water quality. I believe there's a potential problem with the adjacent farm regarding spraying the land with fertilizers, weed killing, etc. So again, I would ask officers to clarify this, please. And subject to the matters raised being addressed, I think on balance, I agree with the recommendation, and even though I know people don't like it. Thank you.
Yeah, so condition 4 of the recommendation basically requires a private water supply management plan to be submitted, and that would include details of how the supply is provided to the houses and also future testing and maintenance of the water from the borehole. In terms of the
Excuse me, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but would that be some specialist management company? I mean, I think that ought to be written in.
yeah, so that, well, in terms of the management of the borehole, it's not something we would expect to get involved in, but the condition does require that sampling and testing is in accordance with the relevant regulations in terms of the public health water quality. The requirements of the condition 4 aren't exhaustive, so we can pursue the management plan as part of condition 4 as currently worded.
Okay, thank you. And what about?
In terms of surrounding agricultural activities, the protection zone is automatically created around the borehole and it would extend for about 50 metres. It would prevent use of fertilisers and manure spreading. It's not something we'd enforce as a planning authority or a council, and similarly, it's not something that the Environment Agency would get involved in. So we've approached it in terms of making sure that any activities within that 50-metre radius wouldn't cause a public health nuisance in terms of contaminants into the borehole. And what Environmental Health have advised is, subject to appropriate treatment, existing activities and future activities within that protection zone wouldn't impact on water quality. So there's no expectation that surrounding agricultural activities would impact on water quality being delivered by the borehole.
Okay, thank you. And the business of switching over, is it envisaged that these would be within the home, like an on-off switch for your electricity? Or is it envisaged that, you know, should the worst happen, somebody just to race to the borehole and turn it on? And I'm not very happy with the idea that future residents would have to take this responsibility, because people are people. And, you know, there's always something else to do, isn't there?
Yeah. So the fact that there's a 106 agreement on the site means it will show up as a land charge. So whenever people move into the property, it will flag that this 106 is on the land and it relates to the borehole requirements. But condition 10 of item 6 covers the contingency should there be an emergency like a pump failure. And that's what requires the monitoring in terms of whether whether mains water is used. So conditions 4 and 10 relate to one another to make sure that the supply from the borehole is the first port of call for water usage within the building, and that if for whatever reason mains water has to be used, condition 10 requires it be monitored so that we can investigate in the future to see if there's a breach of the condition.
Well, thank you. I accept what you say, but I do think we need to be very careful in terms of water usage. So should it switch over to the mains? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Councillor Houghton.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Can I just confirm what it is that I think I understand, which is that the borehole, there's no guarantee of the amount of water in the borehole. Is there any guarantee once it's been drilled out or not?
No, so we need the drilling to take place to assess the quantity and the quality of water.
Sorry, you have to.
We need the drilling of the borehole to take place to get the quantity and quality of the water data.
And is there any way of knowing the quantity? I mean, the man from the consultancy, the specialist, said that he was very au fait with it. He drilled a lot of drill holes in this area, but I don't remember a borehole application coming through, and I'm sure nobody else does in this area.
Yeah, so generally speaking, we don't get planning applications for boreholes. Simply because it's on private land and doesn't always need permission. So the predicted quantity of water from a borehole is taken from nearby boreholes. So it's extrapolated onto this site. It's not confirmation that it'll be provided, but it's the best indicator we have for what's likely to happen.
Councillor Biggers.
Yes, very briefly. Thank you for this very long presentation. Thank you for your detailed responses. I share some of the concerns that have been expressed. Cannot see any reason to refuse these applications. It's the first one we've actually ever dealt with that I can remember that's had a borehole as part of the planning application, which really has complicated it. But I am convinced that the Section 106 agreement is robust enough to protect all those concerns that have been expressed. So on that basis, I should be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Poffey.
Thank you, Chairman. Just purely for clarification points, a couple of things that I wasn't quite clear on. In terms of the switch over to the emergency supply, if that is required, will that be on a property by property basis or on the development as a whole? It would be interesting to know that. And also in terms of the condition that's being placed on the development onwards subject to the findings of the borehole, is that condition on, I think you said it, but just for clarity, both the quality of the water, but also the quantity being sufficient for the dwellings that it is serving? Thank you.
Yes, so condition 4 is one of the key ones, and that would cover quantity and quality of water. In terms of the switchover, again, the details for that would have to come through a condition. But if the expectation is that emergency use would be like a pump failure, it would probably apply to all the houses in the development.
Thank you. Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm still considering this application, and I'm listening carefully to members' views in the room. I'm concerned over Appendix 10, which is the condition note regulating the approval of the site. There's a law of quantum mechanics that says, you know, something gets them, you can't change the outcome without monitoring, evaluating, or reviewing something. I think we're setting a precedent here today as a council that that boreholes will be acceptable for use to solve use to solve water neutrality, and that's a very blatant, flippant statement that we're going to be setting a precedent at, or at least in my opinion, that's what we're doing. I am concerned about the recording and monitoring of that, and some of this is hearsay. I know a friend that is a plumber and does work on the Thacombe site up at Pease Pottage, and they have great grey rainwater harvesting. And as part of that development, they're supposed to flush their toilets, water their plants with grey rainwater harvesting. But similar to this borehole, they are connected to the mains. And he tells me as a plumber that almost every house he's been to in that Thacombe development is turned off. They turn the rainwater harvesting off. They don't want to use the grey water flushing their toilets. Now, I appreciate we have to consider this planning application in front of me, but based on my knowledge of homeowners flipping that switch and turning that off, I feel as a council that we need some ability to monitor, evaluate and review that process going forward. And if members are minded in this room to approve this application, I would like to see that condition note improved to say something like the meter readings must be submitted on an annual basis to Horsham Council for review. There is wording about that they need to keep a record, and I appreciate they need to keep a record, but I feel we need to put a more stringent measure in place if we're minded to review this. As I said, I'm not totally happy with everything I'm hearing this evening, and I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be voting for this, but if it is liable to be approved, I'd very much like an amendment to say that the water meter readings from those properties are submitted annually to Horsham District Council. Thank you.
Would the officer like to respond?
Yeah, I think there is scope to amend condition 10 to make those details available. I think if it's amended, our preference would be that the details such as water bills are made available to us upon our request, so that therefore, if for whatever reason we're led to believe there's a problem there or the pump isn't working, we can request them as and when they're needed rather than require them on an arbitrary 12-month period. Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. And thank you for your reply. I would very much like to submit it to us. I appreciate we are making work for the officer and we are making work for the department. But as I said, we are setting almost a national precedent on this in this room today. So I would very much like those water bills to be submitted annually so that you know, householders and the Section 106 and anyone purchasing these properties is very clear on their legal obligation to comply with the regulations. Thanks, Chairman.
Clearly that decision rests with councillors in terms of whether you wish to amend that condition and how you wish to amend it. I think the difficulty is with submitting them on an annual basis effectively leaves a compliance case open in perpetuity, where those details would have to be submitted and the compliance case remain open, because that's the only way in which we could monitor it. Generally, we'd only monitor something on a regular basis if we've got cause for concern. So that's why I think officers feel that having them available and accessible if we do have those concerns is more appropriate, but it's clearly open to members to amend that condition as you see fit. Thank you.
Councillor Lambert.
Chairman, I fully agree with the officer that if we have cause for concern and there's been water problems, then we have the right to ask for the meter readings. To do it every year, I think is just adding unnecessary workload on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. It's kind of it's bouncing around the can you switch it on, can you switch it off, who's responsible, who's not responsible. Surely if there's an emergency situation and it's under a contract of maintenance, it will be that business that can take the responsibility to switch it over to replenish the loss of water from the site. And it shouldn't be just a resident choice to flick a switch. If that was at all possible, I wouldn't think that would be allowed. So can we ensure or get some more clarity around how that cutover can be executed and ensure that it has to be an approved party that does it, rather than putting it at the mercy of a resident in 2 o'clock in the morning to go and flick a switch. I just don't think that makes any sense at all. But I don't know how these things work, so I welcome some feedback on that.
Yeah, again, I think it's a fair point. I think the recommendations try to secure that information through condition, simply because, again, it all comes back to the detail on quantity and quality not being there at the present time. So the management plans will probably have to change once that's known. So condition 4 on item 7 includes things like how to secure continuity of supply, because the reality is there have to be some storage of water sourced from the borehole. It's not, rather than just being pumped as and when you need it, there will be some sort of storage on place on the site. And condition 4 similarly requires details of maintenance, servicing and cleaning, because there will be downtime where the continuity of supply will need to be provided by some other means. So the expectation is that everything will have to be delivered through the conditions, and we think they're enforceable enough that we can do that.
Councillor Kitchen.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say I agree with my colleague here, Councillor Hogben. In many ways, I think we are setting a precedent that we don't know really where that's going. And I personally think that this whole application is before us is too soon. I think we should have had more of the answers before we were asked the questions. But the question I would like to ask is, in your recommendation, it says that director of the place be authorised to refuse permission on grounds of failure. Can I ask that if this does go through tonight, that the local member is included before that decision is made? Because I am concerned not so much about this. We all know aquifers dry up. They did down in Poolbury years ago. And I'm not worried about the basic application. I am concerned about the precedent we may be setting. My personal opinion is this is premature, but it is before us, so we'll discuss it.
We can amend the recommendation if members wish to ensure that when any decision is made, it's in consultation with local members after the completion of the legal agreement.
Councillor Hogben, would you like to move an amendment to along the lines of an annual check?
Yes, please, Chairman. If Councillor Kitchen is happy to second that amendment, I would like that policy 10 just worded that the annual meter readings are submitted to Horsham District Council. I do appreciate that I'm going slightly against the recommendation by the officer, but thank you.
Thank you. Can we just get the wording on that clear so that we know what we're voting?
Short, I'm seconding. Can I ask him to repeat that? Because I don't want to second something I'm not sure about. What actually are you asking me to second?
I'm after the homeowners to submit an annual meter reading, which in theory should be 0 every year. If the borehole has completed successfully, then the reading should be a nil value submission every year. Obviously, if the reading is not a nil value, then we'll need an explanation as to the remedial action, the pump failure, and the emergency. So pretty much it's been requested. They've been asked in condition 10 to keep details of it. I'm just asking them to submit those details to the Horsham Council.
Councillor Bevan?
I'm not sure Councillor Hogben's suggestion actually covers it, because I mean it is possible. I hope it doesn't happen, but it is possible that the machinery could break down or something, and it would be off, say, for 2 days or something like that. I appreciate that doesn't make it water neutral, but then everybody would actually have water usage on their reading. But my main concern is who's actually going to switch it on and off. That's what I want to know.
Thank you. I agree a 0 reading would be unreasonable, but perhaps the officer could suggest a wording.
I think, as per Councillor Hogben's suggestion, it's to ensure that meter readings are submitted annually, and that would result in amendment to condition 10 of item 6 and condition 9 of item 7. But all other substantial elements of the recommendation remain the same, and that's Councillor Hogben's suggested amendment. But clearly that needs to be seconded and voted on if we're to proceed. Thank you.
Councillor Olsen.
Just point of order. If we vote on the amendment as proposed at the moment, will we not miss out on voting on the additional amended conditions proposed, particularly by the local member, including adjusting the downlight conditions, the reviewed parking scheme, and I believe there was also the point made by also Councillor Kitchen about the consultation with the local member. So do we not need an amendment that covers all 4 of those condition changes before we vote?
If there are further amendments to conditions, then they would need to be put forward as part of the same alternative motion for members to vote on. In terms of lighting, there is already a condition on there that says no further lighting shall be installed other than that already showed on the plan. In terms of drainage, there's already a condition on the outline scheme. Sorry, Councillor Olsen, I can't remember the further point.
Sorry, it was the downlights, and forgive me, but I believe the plan showed 4 lanterns, and I believe the local member wanted those changed from lanterns to downlights as proposed by the speakers. The other thing was the parking scheme, which was proposed to, seeing that it was raised as an issue by county, that there was 2 parking spaces lacking. And then the last bit was that the director of place consults with the local member for refusing the application in the future. So I believe all those need to be included in an amendment.
Amendments because that's the most contentious. Everyone agrees with yours.
Well, it depends what he wants to do. Okay, shall I ask him? Councillor Hogben, do you wish to proceed with the amendment as suggested, or do you wish to change your motion to include these additional points?
Thank you. It was the local member. Perhaps we need to go back to refer, because they were her questions, and they were questions rather than an amendment that's been seconded. So perhaps it's a point of order that we need to go back to the local amendment and see whether the local member is happy with the officer's reply.
And you expect it to be 0 on the sledge.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Chairman,
Yes, councillor
Can I-
Bragdon, would you, how would you feel about including councillor Hogben's amendment?
well, I was going to ask if the head of planning can please word something up and read it to us. And tell us what you think, please.
Councillor Minto, point of order.
Maybe like everyone else getting seriously confused by all this, but is this a moot subject? I totally appreciate why we don't want to set a precedent. We don't want anyone drawing water from Southern Water, whoever it may be, therefore contributing to the lack of water across the whole system. But if there's a management program being put in place that clearly stops any abuse, i.e. only they can switch across from borehole to mains, then we don't need anyone submitting any bills or meter readings because it won't happen. So is there not something we can do to clarify that point? And what's going to happen? What's an emergency? Someone mentioned it from the public. What is an emergency? What are we doing about it? Who's taking responsibility, and what and when can we switch to mains? Because if it's very, very limited, and it's only an engineer from the management company can do that switch, there can be no abuse by a member of the public because they won't have the keys to the car. So I just wonder why we're putting all these conditions in when it might be swept up with a little bit more clarity on the management process of this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Members, can I make a suggestion? It's clear from the room that members are generally happy with the proposal, but there are some concerns and some amendments to conditions which are being suggested. Can I suggest that it's delegated for approval, subject to the finalisation of conditions, in consultation with the local member, and taking on board the points that have been raised today, and we can then have a further discussion to finalise and amend some of those conditions that have been discussed today. That would require the room to put forward that motion and for that to be seconded. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I'm happy to either propose or second that delegation.
Councillor Allen, if you.
Yeah, I'll second that. Point of order, could we just check that obviously we have previously had a motion proposed and seconded, so I think we should check whether that is withdrawn in favour of this one first. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm more than happy. I think Councillor Minter makes some very fair and valid points. I said I'm just relating this back to what's happened in Pease Pottage with each individual homeowner turning the water supply off for a long period of time. It's never on. I just want to make sure that these conditions are suitably in place. If the conditions are suitably in place, that the homeowners can't just turn it off, then I'm happy to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Hogben. Okay, we will. Councillor Olsen.
Just one more point of order. If I'm correct, these are still 2 votes. Is that right? So this proposal you're making is to place on both of them?
That would be for members to put forward that, but that would be my suggestion, yes.
I just meant, does that mean we need 2 motions in 2 seconds or 2 amendments in 2 seconds?
Yes, but the same members can put forward to make sure it's clear it's on both items.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think we can finally go to a vote on this one. So we just to clarify, there's going to be 2 votes. The first one will be on the borehole, which is the DC 211798, and then the second one will be on the associated housing. Sorry, I gave the wrong number. 1178 is the borehole. So we'll do the borehole first. The recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions.
Sorry, can you just clarify delegation for approval?
Delegation.
Thank you.
Delegate to approve, subject to the conditions as Emma has discussed, and consultation with local members. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Anyone against? And any abstentions?
Just to advise you, we had 18 for, no against, and 3 abstentions.
Thank you. So the item is approved. So the next vote is on the housing. What's the number? So that's 1798. Again, the recommendation is to delegate to approve, subject to the conditions previously described. Can I have a vote? All those in favour, please raise their hand. And all those against, please raise their hand. And any abstentions?
Just to clarify, it's the same with 18 for, none against, and 3 abstentions.
Thank you. So again, that is approved. Thank you very much. We can finally move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is DC 220939, Roppy Place, Old Crawley Road, Fairgate, Horsham. And we have four speakers. Sorry, I believe the officer presentation first. Thank you. Actually, bear in mind it's now 10 to 7, so that's around about the time that we were looking to break. Didn't expect the first item to go on quite that long. So we'll take a short break. If we could come back, if everyone could be back at 5 minutes to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Everyone, please take their seats again. We've got plenty of items to get through yet. Everyone's delighted with that prospect. Okay, so item 8 on the agenda, DC 220939, Roffey Place, Old Crawley Road, Baygate. Would the officer like to do a first presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application site comprises an existing residential college and grounds located off the Old Crawley Road, some 860 metres northeast of the Horsham built-up area boundary. It lies within the high wheeled AONB and includes an adjacent Grade 2 listed building. There is a public right-of-way network present around the site. Wider properties nearby include residential properties, business units, agricultural land, including a pick-your-own farm, farm shop and tea room, and a preschool nursery. The whole site was last in use by the Kingdom Faith Church as a hub for theological courses offering residential and degree courses with accommodation in the gatehouse and the main building. You can see marked in orange. The building includes some supporting facilities on the ground floor. The Kingdom Faith Church has had a presence on the site since the mid-1970s. Existing vehicular accesses are located off Clovers Way to the north of the site, which is currently gated. And then there are 2 further accesses marked with the green arrows, which are dedicated as in and out accesses into the site. There's parking within the site in 3 specific areas. Cursor here. There's an area in front of the listed building, an area in front of the main building here marked in green, and an adjacent area here. The application excludes the listed building and its walled gardens, which are both to remain closed off and secured. The site has been subject to significant vandalism since Kingdom Faith vacated earlier in the year. Some photos of the site. Here you can see the 2 access points coming off Old Crawley Road, both the in and the out access, and the building itself, which, as you can see, is a utilitarian functional college type facility building, and internal shots of the facility as it stands. And you can see there's some vandalism present within the bathrooms, where various bits and pieces have been, it's quite a significant degree of vandalism. The proposal seeks a change of use of the existing main building and the gatehouse to function as a homeless hostel for individuals seeking a way out of their homeless situation and back into longer term accommodation. It would provide 50 bed spaces, and overall the facility is envisaged to be on site for 5 years. Roffey Place would offer the accommodation for periods of 6 to 9 months and will offer an associated range of supporting holistic services to facilitate the return back into independent living and to end rough sleeping in the district. Residents within the shelter must be willing to engage positively with the services being offered on site. The change of use will require interior fit outs, but no external changes to the building. And there's very limited changes proposed to the floor plans. As you can see in the gatehouse, there's a couple of internal walls being added, and then no changes to the main building, and some internal walls to the first floor in the main building. Officers acknowledge the unusual nature of the proposal and the associated concerns about how the service will be run and managed, particularly as the nature of the hostel is very unique and specific to the needs of the residents and services being offered. Furthermore, it is acknowledged that the site is located outside of the built-up area boundary and therefore in an unsustainable location insofar as residential development is concerned. However, this is not a residential development in the usual sense, but rather an integrated facility that offers accommodation and associated services for homeless people who are actively seeking help. To address these concerns, the applicants have submitted a robust management plan setting out how aspects of the facility would be managed, including protocols that are in place in the event of any issues at the site, including breaches of residential tenancy. Furthermore, the facility would operate a minibus shuttle bus service into Horsham so that residents can access services, employment, etc. within the town. Again, there are contingencies in place in the event of a resident missing a bus, also set out in the management plan. The proposal is considered to be water neutral as it has been able to demonstrate that the previous residential use as a college consumed more water than the proposed facility would do once new water efficient sanitary ware and fittings are in place, which have largely been vandalised, as you could see. Officers acknowledge that the proposal seeks an active reuse of an existing site and buildings which are currently vacant and would not require external works or alterations, therefore presents no adverse impact on the setting of the AONB or the adjacent heritage assets. Furthermore, the location of the site has been adequately mitigated by way of the shuttle bus service to be implemented as part of the facility. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to the conditions shown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 4 speakers on this item. The first speaker is Maxwell Walton. If you could come to the table with the light on at the back. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Dear members, my name is Max Walton. My family have owned Newhouse Farm, neighbouring the application site, for over 60 years. This is a rural area with few households along the Old Crawley Road. I was shocked to say the least when I learned of this application. I believe myself, neighbours and all of you as members fully support this good cause, but it's simply a case of the right cause in the wrong location. While the officer has recommended permission, planning by its nature can often be argued both ways depending on what weight different people give different parts of policies. If you stand back and look at this proposal, you can only come to the conclusion that to put 50 homeless people in a building in the countryside adjacent to the busy A264 is at best ill thought out and dangerous. This is the wrong location for the number of people with no pavements, no street lamps. However, the applicant tries to compensate by laying on a minibus service. Surely the charity needs to be looking at vacant sites within the town for conversion in a safer and more secure environment. The use now being proposed is completely different in terms of its intensity compared to the former religious institution. It is misleading for the committee to report to imply that the uses are the same when they are starkly different, as evidenced by the police consultation response. It is of concern to existing residents that the police, in their consultation response on this application, have anticipated that the proposal potentially places an additional burden on the policing resources, which does not bode well. The welfare of the homeless people has not been properly considered, and they will effectively be in a compound in the countryside cut off from the town. Inadequate thought has been given both their amenity and that of the existing residents, and I would urge members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second speaker is Keith Webster, also in objection. And you also have 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Webster and I've been a resident of Old Crawley Road for 9 years. I have 3 major concerns about the proposed change of use of Roffey Place. Firstly, the traffic on Old Crawley Road has increased at least tenfold since the roadworks commenced on the A264. This is likely to continue now that the shortcut has been discovered by the motorists. The speed limit is 60 miles per hour and it is dangerous for local residents to join the road from their properties, particularly on blind bends such as that outside my property. A few months ago, my son and I were first on the scene of a fatal accident right outside my property, which was a very traumatic experience and one which I don't wish to repeat. There will be more fatalities on this road in the future, particularly if there are 50 more residents with no suitable transport links to any reasonable facilities and amenities. I imagine most of the tenants will be pedestrian, so we'll be wandering on the unlit road at all hours of the day and night. Secondly, one of the stated aims of the project is to help homeless people to rehabilitate back into the community and society. However, the tenants will find themselves in a no man's land somewhere out in the sticks and out of reach of the social interaction they require to rehabilitate. And finally, it would appear the company with a controlling interest in the site has its registered office here in this very building at HDC, and its directors are current serving senior officers at HDC, with Turning Tides as the managing agent. This covert and rather incestuous relationship could appear to the layperson, such as myself and many others, to imply some subterfuge is at play, or at least to question the integrity of HDC in this case. In short, the proposal may tick statistical boxes, but it does not solve the problem.
Can you draw your remarks to a close now? We've had 2 minutes.
I am closing. Because it is in the wrong location, and I would urge the committee to reject the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Robert Carmichael, also an objection, and also 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Robert Carmichael. My family have lived at Moorhead Farm in Old Crawley Road for over 70 years. I would like to start by saying that I fully understand the pressing need to help the homeless.
and in support of charities such as Turning Tide. Indeed, we regularly held fundraising events at Moorhead Farm for shelter and crisis over the many years. And I believe it is shameful that in the 21st century, not everyone has a safe and secure place to live. However, it is because of this conviction that I object to this application. I recognise the opportunity to help the homeless, but sadly, this is in the wrong place. The location is dangerous and isolating, as we've already heard, due to the risk posed by the surrounding roads and the lack of local amenities. But I'm not alone in this. The police have described the Old Crawley Road as a considerable safety risk. West Sussex County Council Highways described the site as unsustainable in spite of the mitigation measures proposed by the shuttle bus. And at least half of the objection letters that were sent in raised the location as a concern. One said, sadly, this is a disaster waiting to happen. But really, there is no wait. As we discussed earlier on this year, a cyclist was killed by a speeding motorist close to the site. And whilst this sort of incident has recently become rare, in the past, Old Crawley Road was an accident black spot. I myself saw a motorcyclist fly through the road and witnessed a man die by burning inside his car. In addition to the risk posed by the Old Crawley Road is a nearby A264 dual carriageway. Any residents wishing to use the bus will need to cross the dual carriageway and walk along the dual carriageway. And to get to the nearest shops in Faygate, they will also need to cross the dual carriageway and walk even further down the dual carriageway. It's very easy to get bogged down in this discussion as to whether or not it's going to be water neutral, although 50 residents living on a site for 6 months doesn't sound like it's going to use less water than a place where people go for a couple of weeks.
Mr. Carmichael, you've had 2 minutes if you could finish up.
Okay, right. So I think there's a simple choice here. Either we ignore the risks, hope for the best and approve the application, or we decide that it is not appropriate to house Horsham's homeless in an unsafe, unsustainable, isolating location and reject the application.
Thank you very much. And the final speaker is Catherine Hill, the applicant, and you also have 2 minutes.
Turning Tides have been helping people out of homelessness for 30 years, but we have never seen the picture that we're facing at the moment. The number of single households in Horsham who are accommodated in emergency accommodation have increased by 933% in 1 year. This number is expected to rise significantly due to the cost of living crisis, and we expect that undoubtedly there'll be an increase in homelessness and rough sleeping in the Horsham district. Within Horsham, there currently is no high support accommodation, meaning that many single households are accommodated in emergency accommodation with limited or no support. Roffey Place will be a local service for local people and provides much needed accommodation for those that have unfortunately suffered multiple and prolonged disadvantages throughout their life, providing intensive support to residents to empower them to fulfil their potential and to reintegrate into society. Turning Tides have a proven track record of providing high quality and well-run accommodation services to those experiencing homelessness in West Sussex for over 30 years. Last year, for example, we supported just under 900 people and have been working in the Horsham district for 6 years. Roffey Place will have a robust management plan in place, which includes staffing 24 hours a day. All residents will be carefully assessed in partnership with Horsham District Council before accessing the scheme and will be required to sign a licence agreement and associated house rules. We note concerns from some residents and the police in regards to the rural location of the site and the risk that this may pose for residents of Roffey Place. To mitigate this risk, we will provide a dedicated shuttle bus. This will provide residents with the opportunity to safely access local services without the need to walk on roads currently without pathways. With this measure, we consider this risk to be greatly reduced, but would also seek to support any additional safety measures needed along this road to benefit the whole community. We are confident that Roffey Place, through our partnership with the council and local agencies, will bring an end to the need for people to sleep rough in Horsham. This is a unique opportunity that we've never had the chance to do before. And this will also reduce the devastating impact on rough sleeping, both on the individual lives of those that we support, but also the local community.
Thank you very much. Bang on time. Would officers like to come back on any of the points raised?
In response to the location of the site, it is acknowledged that there aren't that many services nearby. West Sussex County Council consider an average walkability is 1 kilometre, so 1,000 metres. Within this 1,000 metre radius, the only facilities or amenities are the tea rooms at the New House Farm, which is about 250 metres from the site. There is a limited footway along Old Crawley Road as well. And as a result, it is recognised that there wouldn't be that much walking going on along Old Offey Road to reach services because it's simply too far. And as officers, we do consider that the minibus service would mitigate the exceptional circumstances and the unique nature of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to councillors now. The local members who would like to go first.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have to say, I do have a lot of empathy with the objectors this evening. If we sit here and look at this site, it is in the AONB, an area of outstanding natural beauty. Crawley Road, Old Crawley Road. You've heard a very horrific story about a gentleman, a tragic death on that road earlier in the year. It has no lighting. If you read the report in detail, West Sussex County Council do say it's an unsustainable location, that the police do raise concerns. And I have concerns, and as a council, we have a duty to care to those other residents. We've had at least 28 letters of complaint, I think it's over 30, about this site. So this isn't an open and shut case. On the positives, this is a building that's been derelict for some time. It's been run down, disused. It would be good from a sort of an economic development and employment point of view to bring that back into the public realm. I think there is no doubt in my mind that if this was a new application sitting before us today, it would be turned down. But it's not. This is a change of use, and that's where that's where the situation arises, that the change of use from a Bible college to a housing, having 50 residents on site when it's possibly always had 50 residents on site, and it's got 50 parking spaces. This is the thing that kind of is drawing the conclusions that the officers have recommended this for approval. So I do have much empathy for the local residents. I would love to support the local residents in objecting to this, but alas, none of the statutory consultees have raised a formal objection. West Sussex have stated, as I said, that it's unsustainable. However, on the grounds that it's always had the parking, it's always had the number of residents there, West Sussex County Council haven't raised a formal objection. The Parish Council haven't raised a formal objection. So we have lots of concerns, but no legal planning grounds, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I would like to support the local residents to turn it down. The homeless people, obviously it's incredibly positive. It is one of our ambitions in Horsham to reduce our number of homelessness. I think we've done very well as a council, but as we know, there's a cost of living crisis, and that is going up and up and up. And obviously I wish to do as much as I can and everything I can. So I am mindful that we have a duty of care to local residents. I am also mindful that we have a housing situation in our district that we need to resolve. What I would like to propose, if I have a seconder in the room, is that this is delegated to the local member, to the chair of Planning North and myself, to review the management plan to see if we can make any of these conditions more stringent, because the areas around public safety, the areas around antisocial behaviour, and there is a lack of consultation with the residents of Crawley Road. If you read the consultation response, they aren't happy with that. They've not been consulted with and engaged with, and myself and the local member are happy to continue that conversation. So on balance, and it is an on balance, and that's based on the lack of planning grounds for objections, I will reluctantly be supporting the application. But if I have a seconder, I would like to propose an amendment that is delegated to the chair of Planning North and myself as the local members for review of the management plan and traffic plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hogben. With your consent, I'll leave that till later so that some people have a chance to speak. Otherwise, no one gets a chance to say anything. Councillor Kitchen.
On this occasion, I have absolutely no hesitation in seconding that, so he's got a seconder. Before I start, I would just like to make a comment about Mr. Webster's comment. I'm absolutely sure what he said is true, but I haven't checked on it. But I do rather object to being called in cohorts with what's going on here. I sit here on the planning committee as a planning committee, and I'm sorry, Mr. Webster, but I'm not happy with that comment, and I'd just like to make that quite clear. My next comment is, I think it's an absolute disgrace that the listed building people haven't got on to the situation that this Roffey place has turned itself into. It's a complete disgrace, and it is a listed building. And frankly, if you or I had let our buildings get into this condition, we would have been fined. And so I think the people responsible for listed buildings should have a rap over the knuckles at least for that. I'll go on to say I haven't got a lot more to add to my fellow councillors' comments. I totally understand the concerns of the local members, and quite frankly, if it was happening near me, I'd probably be doing exactly the same. But I think now there's a perception of homeless which isn't actually as it used to be. We all know that some homeless people these days are working and they just cannot afford their rent. So I think this is very, very necessary at the moment, and I do support it, whilst understanding the concerns of the local members. I think the plan is very important, but I have been involved with conversations, as anyone was at the open day at Roffey Place, and I'm quite happy with the way that that the management plan will come in. So yes, with the seconding the amendment that it's not an amendment actually, is it? It's a request that has come in from my member. I do support this application, but totally and completely understand the concerns, which hopefully we can mitigate over the time. And I do know that it's for 5 years, so it'll probably be at least a year before they get it up and running.
Thank you, Councillor Kitchen. Councillor Ogden, would you consent to let the debate go and then we'll vote on your amendment?
Yes, please, Chairman. I'll be very, very interested to hear other people's views in the room. Thank you, particularly the cabinet member, actually. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Any opposite comments so far? Or? Okay. I'll throw it open. Councillor Newton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As I am the cabinet member for housing, I'm very keen to work towards ending the need for anyone to sleep rough or be homeless in our district. And the more we can do to facilitate this aim, I am sure we should follow. We're delighted to work with Turning Tides. They're a well-respected and experienced group of people who work with mainly single people whose lives have benefited by receiving the specialist care and attention that they so desperately require. And the end result of these interventions and help results in them becoming focused, confident, and valuable members of our society. The majority of these mainly young men are from our district, and the added benefit is that we reduce the amount of residents' money that we spend on bed and breakfast accommodation, thus enabling us to have more ability to help others in need of help financially. There have been objections on the grounds of highway safety, but apart from the fact that this issue is actually West Sussex County Council highways and not part of Horsham District Council's responsibility, there is a definite need for minibus transport as and when required by the residents, and this will be worked out according to demand. Turning Tides are well qualified to deal with any problems that occur, and there will always be 24-hour supervision. And it must be mentioned that Roffey Place has had a number of varying uses, most of which have involved residential occupation, and due to the lack of public transport, the minibus service, we feel, will compensate adequately for this. I really urge all members to support this application, which does give Horsham a truly wonderful opportunity to further demonstrate our commitment providing housing and opportunities that most require it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Fetcher.
Thank you very much. The work that Turning Tides is proposing to do here is really incredibly important. I appreciate that there are concerns about risks both to the public and to the members of the Turning Tides community if it goes ahead. There are risks to both the public and the homeless people themselves if nothing happens, and if there's an alternative provision in another location. There are some downsides to this location, but on the whole, it does seem to be appropriate, with one really serious exception, in my view, which is the issue of road safety. And I'm frankly, the police have noted that there is a serious risk. I forget their exact wording. It's a considerable safety risk, and I'm really shocked by the report that we've received from West Sussex Highways, which has only looked at one aspect of the road safety here, or a couple of aspects. It's looked at the intensity of motor traffic being caused by this new development. And of course, they've come to the conclusion there's no increase in intensity caused by the development. And they've looked at the access in and out from the road. But these are not the serious safety issues along this road. When I went out to see the site for myself, I was quite shocked, having been used to cycling along this road to go and pick strawberries at the farm and what have you. I was shocked to be met by significant speeding oncoming traffic of motorists who are using the route now as a rat run to bypass the Moorhead roundabout. And they're doing this, as the member of public said, because the roadworks opened up to other people the possibility that you could use this as a shortcut. People didn't realise it before. So there is unsafe driving going along on that road. And that issue was not recognised by West Sussex's report. Even in the subsequent report, when they were responding to the issue of the fatality, which was to a cyclist who was going along the road and a driver who was apparently driving either carelessly or recklessly. What they have not recognised is the increase in speed, the increase in quantity of motor traffic, and the increase in the number of vulnerable people who are likely to be walking and cycling on this road. And Turning Tides representatives have told us that residents are likely to want to walk and cycle, and why shouldn't they? And I commend the proposal to have a really comprehensive 7-day minibus service, but it's not right that people should be effectively imprisoned and only go out on a minibus. People are perfectly entitled to go out and do things in the community as individuals, and that is the point of the community, to help people be integrated into society. So I'm struggling to find how we deal with this, given that the officers have accepted West Sussex's report as a highways authority. But it is absolutely, in my view, absolutely unsatisfactory. There is a significant safety risk. It is not a coincidence, in my view, that there has actually been a fatality already along this stretch of road. And I really want to urge whoever, whether this is our planning officers, our cabinet member, Turning Tides people, to do something about this. There's a very obvious solution to this particular part of the highways problem. This is a road that does not need to be used as a through road. So if there are some bollards put to stop off the exits from the A264, so that anyone who's accessing this road comes through the Moorhead roundabout and then doubles back to go along, that would dramatically increase the quantity of the traffic. It would also reduce the speed of the traffic. And it would also avoid a repetition of the type of collision that has, again, already occurred since these roadworks, where somebody who is turning left to do the shortcut has been shunted by an oncoming vehicle or a vehicle behind them on the A264, because those junctions with the A264 are simply not designed to the standard. I don't know why West Sussex hasn't recognised this. They're not design manual for roads and bridges standards junctions. They're not suitable for more than casual use. So I don't know whether the officers can comment on whether there is any way that this can be addressed within the condition for delegation. Even if there isn't, it's really a plea to everybody else in Horsham district to take this really seriously and look into whether a measure such as the bollards can be put in place, and that would make it safer and quieter for residents as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Would the officer like to come respond on that?
You have before you the comments of West Sussex County Council as the Highway Authority, and clearly they've raised no objection. I do hear the comments that have been raised and the concerns raised. The difficulty is it's an existing problem. It's not a resultant problem of the development. And generally speaking, you would ask for highway improvements to mitigate the impacts of a development. In this, can I finish, please? In this instance, it is not a direct result of the development. Notwithstanding that, it is open to members to defer the item for further consideration of this matter, to delegate approval to further consideration of the matter. But officers' view are we've got the comments from County Highways and therefore we should proceed on that basis. But clearly that is a decision for members. Thank you.
As a point of order, could I just say that although the increase in traffic, motor traffic, is not a result of this application, the increase in pedestrian and cycle traffic, the people who are going to be hit and injured or killed as a result of this, is a direct result of the application and therefore does fall under planning as something that could be mitigated. So maybe as part of the delegation, we could be asking West Sussex to have another look at this and consider this aspect and the proposed solution.
Councillor Bevis.
Thank you, Chairman. I walk along this road fairly often to Newhouse Farm, and to be honest, I don't find it dangerous. It's not wonderful, but it's the old Crawley Road. Most of the traffic, nearly all of the traffic, is on the dual carriageway. At the moment, yes, there are a few people using it as a rat run because of the problems at Moorhead Roundabout and on the North Horsham bypass. But generally, there isn't a great number of cars going on there. There's quite often families out on that road cycling. I don't think it's particularly dangerous. And I think once the work on the North Horsham bypass is finished, then the traffic will go back to its old level, which is pretty sporadic. So sorry to disagree with my colleague, but I think this is a problem that really doesn't exist.
Thank you, Councillor Bevis. Councillor Vickers.
Councillor Bevis more or less said what I was going to say. Thank you very much. I also know this road. I've actually been down it quite a few times recently, and I think the perception is that it's dangerous when it actually isn't that dangerous. And you're quite right. I think it's got worse since the roadworks have been going on at the Moorhead roundabout and along the A264. I'm perfectly happy to accept the officer's recommendation. If they want delegation in consultation with the local members to just tighten up the conditions, I'm happy to support that. But I do think we should delegate this for approval and get on with it. The homeless do need somewhere to go. I'm totally in favour of it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Greening.
It's a question for the officers. The last paragraph of the County Council report on the highways, it says, therefore, the location of the site is not considered to be sustainable, nor does it meet with the MPF guidelines for providing sustainable developments. How does one get from that position to not having an objection? Because that, to me, to the layperson, would seem to be pretty damning from a highways perspective. So if the officers, and I appreciate that the West Sussex aren't here, I just want to get into the mind of how you get from that position to having no objection from a highways perspective, please.
But part of this comes back to what Councillor Hogben said at the beginning in terms of it is an existing lawful use of the site and could be utilised, obviously subject to just generally refurbishing it, but it has an existing lawful use, and that existing lawful use has a level of activity associated with it which could commence tomorrow without planning permission. So that does need to be considered against what is now proposed, in addition to the details of the management plan and the shuttle bus that have been put forward. But it is the case, you know, if it didn't have an existing lawful use with a level of activity associated with it, then perhaps there would be a different view, but that's not where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Hogben. And if
Thank you,
you'd
Chairman.
like to-
Yeah, if I'm happy to amend the recommendation to delegate to recommendation for approval delegated to yourself as chairman of Planning North with consultation with the local members. Could I just also say that I'm happy to take Councillor Fletcher's point forward regarding a TRO. In order to get a TRO, obviously that's our colleagues at West Sussex County Council. It is difficult to get a TRO through. West Sussex County Council does have limited budgets, limited funds, and it would take support of the parish council, probably 90% of the residents and businesses within that road to get that through. So I will take that back to the residents and businesses of that road and see if it's something they're willing to support. If the residents and businesses in that road, on balance, more than 90% of them are willing to support that, I will work with my county colleagues to look to see whether we can take that forward. But that does require consultation with the residents, which I'll be doing, and the businesses, as to whether sealing that road off. Obviously, it could be very damaging to their businesses, and it may be something they are and aren't willing to support. But I will take that point forward separately. Thank you.
It's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Hogben, can I just make a suggestion for your consideration? Obviously, your concern lies with the management plan in terms of whether the details within it are sufficient, and that is condition 4 as drafted. Rather than delegating approval, would it be appropriate to amend the condition which says, notwithstanding the management plan submitted, a revised management plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by us in consultation with local members? That approach would enable a decision to be made in terms of the determination, and then a revised management plan submitted by condition. It might just provide further comfort in the decision, but clearly if the view is you want to see that before a permission is granted, then that is also open to you. But I just wanted to put forward that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I trust your professional judgment. Thank you. I'm happy to go with your recommendation.
Okay, we'll go to a vote on this one. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to condition 4 delegated to for approval by the local members and chair of planning. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. All those, any against? And any abstentions? Thank you.
Just to confirm then, we have 20 for the motion, no one against and no abstentions.
Thank you. So it is resolved that this item is approved, subject to the delegation as specified. Okay, now we going to get a bit of an exit here, I think, but we can move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is DC 220829 Stonehouse Farm, Handcross Road, Plumbers Plain. And if Webster would like to give a presentation first, thank you.
They're saying the site isn't.
Okay, so this application relates to Stonehouse Farm, which is a 41-hectare holding with the southern parcel fronting Home Cross Road. The site is understood to have previously operated a dairy herd, but is now moving towards more mixed livestock. The application seeks permission for the retention of an agricultural building, which would provide a workshop and store for the farm. So the location of the building is shown by the thick red line on this plan, and the red hatching inside that shows the location of now demolished buildings, which were understood to have been in a dilapidated condition. In terms of the surroundings, the building to the north, which has the sort of thick blue outline, that was previously an agricultural store and dairy building, but benefits from a temporary planning permission until March next year for B1 and B8 use, so kind of a light industrial use. After the expiry of that permission, it would revert back to the former agricultural use. In terms of the wider farm site, the application building is shown by the thick red line to the right-hand side. And to the west, there's a cattle shed and yard and an anaerobic digestion building. And the building proposed by this application is linked to the storage maintenance needs of this digestion building. So these are some photos of the building. So the top photo shows the building proposed by application. And the bottom photo shows the neighbouring building, which has a temporary commercial use. And on the right-hand side, this is the outline of the building proposed by this current application. The application is considered to have demonstrated an agricultural need for the building, and this view is shared by the council's agricultural consultant. So this slide shows the proposed building in the green colour and the surrounding buildings in the immediate vicinity of the site. Given the immediate and wider context, the visual impact and the impact on neighbouring community is considered acceptable, and the application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. We have three speakers on this item. The first speaker is Mrs. Annette Keane, who is speaking to object, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. The key objections from neighbours specifically relate to contraventions of the council's planning policies 26, 10 and 33. Policy 26 determines the requirement to consider the cumulative impacts of applications. The cumulative impacts of applications at this site are significant. There have been some 8 planning applications since 2015 where agricultural buildings have been repurposed to industrial use. These have resulted in an array of different businesses, operating hours, disparate vehicle permissions, significant expansion in parking, contrary to policy 10. These developments have also resulted in cumulative increases in noise, dust, vibration, and profanities, which contravene B1 requirements in residential areas. And we are disturbed on a daily basis of our peaceful enjoyment of our properties on both sides of the valley. There are significant compliance concerns as well, with an overwhelming number of enforcement notices related to this site, which take up valuable officers' time. This building compounds these impacts. Its vehicles flows are already displacing operations in the very large adjacent building to an unpermitted entrance. Its size is causing parking displacement, and the continued stripping of trees and hedgerows, which has happened, has left the commercial and private vehicles, skips, lorry washdown, all highly visible on an ever expanding hard standing. The sited tree line fails to screen for noise or floodlights at any time of the year, and it fails to protect our visual amenity for up to a third of a year. The policy 33 amends that are for this development do not address the amenity issue or the cumulative litter of dead biomass across the farm. It's common knowledge that the digester plant has not been operational for about 2 years due to inadequate waste supplies,
long before the dairy herd was sold. And so residents seriously question the feasibility of the waste supply that's being proposed and the essential criteria given. There are also technical issues.
Excuse me, you've had your 2 minutes, so if you could come to the clip.
Finally, if it were to be recommissioned, the vehicle movements for servicing and the necessary resumption of maize importation, which would be required, would be detrimental to an adjacent business. And once again, that business would face lorries spooking their horses who throw children and disabled riders. Thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker is Paddy Miller, who is the agent, and you have 2 minutes.
Members of the committee, I speak on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Cooper. In principle, the retrospective application replaces previous dilapidated buildings that were inadequate and didn't meet modern farming needs. As pointed out in the officer's report, paragraph 6.31, and it complies with schedule part 2, 6 of the GPDO. Due to unexpected reasons, the building as constructed and commenced in 2020 was due to be registered as an application under this part of the legislation, but for some reason it didn't get properly registered. The application sets out clearly the need for this building for the use in maintaining the digester plant, which produces green energy into the national grid. This is temporarily out of use due to considerable loss of plant and spares through theft. Mr. Cooper will bring the plant back into operation in early 2023, once the council's agricultural advisor also concluded that this was reasonable and it was necessary and acceptable, subject to condition Mr. Cooper that the building would retain in agricultural use. It is noted that there are a number of objections to the building posed on visual basis. This basically is set out in paragraph 619 and 624, and the officer has come to the conclusion that it does not form any obtrusion into the landscape. This is unreasonable and is acceptable. The access to and from the digester to this building are on farm tracks granted as part of the parcel of the planning permissions and conditioned within DC.
Can you draw your marks to a conclusion? We had 2 minutes.
Just finishing. 1831 and DC 191122. Mr. Cooper therefore hopes the committee will follow their officer's report and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the final speaker on this item is Councillor Ed Allen of Lower Beeding Parish Council, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. Excuse me, I have a slight cold. Good evening, members of the committee and members of the public and the applicant. The planning application has 10 written objections. And the parish council is speaking this evening in objection to this application, representing the members of Lower Beeding. We agree with HDC this application cannot be considered as a permitted development as the proper procedures were not followed. Not only was the prior notification lost in the post, which is unfortunate, but there was no pre-approval of the building materials for this building. So 2 essential steps were missing, and it was subsequently constructed. There are many detailed arguments from local residents and neighbours, some of which you've heard. I'll cover some alternative ones, which I think are prevalent on the website, and you can review them. Basically, justification for this as an agricultural building has not been provided. Another agricultural building is right next door, as you've just seen in the diagram in the plan. This has a 3-year temporary permission, which is due to expire in 5 months. That building is currently being used for servicing of HGV vehicles, and there is an operator license for 30 HGV vehicles on the site. The original building is considered too large, and so another is required according to the applicant. This is an odd planning argument. I haven't come across that before. The stated agricultural store in the original building, which is being used for HGV servicing, was 292 metres. The new unit is 252 metres squared. These two buildings are approximately the same size. One is an agricultural building. The other is proposed to be an agricultural building to service something else. Why is this required? It doesn't really make sense. The anaerobic digester, as you've probably heard, hasn't been in operation for a long time. The digester requires a consistent supply of waste, and the digester sits on the other side of this farm location. Yes, it can be accessed through the tracks, but to supply the waste to this location, there's either going to have to be an exponential growth in the number of cattle on site, or there will have to be some kind of material brought in by lorries in order to feed the digester. And that doesn't seem realistic. The applicant has a regulatory permit from the Environment Agency. That isn't subject to the planning application, of course, to operate the digester. The company which has that license was actually voluntarily struck off from the Companies House register last year. So there isn't actually an entity at the moment which has a license to operate the digester, but of course a new one could be created. Next to the anaerobic digester, there are two very large dairy buildings, dairy parlour buildings. These aren't being proposed to be used for servicing the digester. That is the purpose of this building here. At the moment, those two buildings don't have the facility to store waste of any description. So the only way that this is going to be a viable digester is for large amounts of material to be brought onto site, and that will be by lorry down Hammer Pond Road. Hammer Pond Road is a country lane. Waste cannot be continuously fed to this digester, meeting the current planning requirements which apply to the neighbouring dairy parlours. On this basis, we would invite the committee to reject this application. The application is for an agricultural building which is not required based on the application that's been submitted. A new application should be submitted to describe what the purpose of this building is actually going to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would the officers like to respond to any of those points?
Yeah, just to confirm really that the application was assessed on the basis of providing an agricultural building on the site, and that's secured through a recommended condition. So any future change of use, whether unauthorised or through an application, would require planning permission. In terms of a need for the building, it was based partly on the fact that there's no comparable secure storage this close to the farmhouse for security purposes. That view was shared by the council's agriculture advisor, and that translated through to the recommendation before you. In terms of the anaerobic digestion building, this application doesn't propose any changes to that or facilitate its use, and that building is subject to its own planning permission and related conditions. So the consideration of this application is related solely to the building in the red line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to go to the local member, which is Councillor Bradnam again.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm absolutely opposed to this recommendation for a retrospective farm permission. And quite honestly, I'm surprised to see it. I absolutely agree with Mrs. Keane and Councillor Allen. This farm is slowly but surely turning into an industrial site. There are several activities and businesses on site which have absolutely nothing to do with farming. It is my belief this building is entirely unnecessary. It's some distance from the biodigester and the adjoining barn, both built before applying for planning permission, neither being used for their intended purpose. This whole farm has just been one thing after another with no regard whatsoever for the surrounding residents. And now apparently there's going to be sheep and pigs introduced into the mix. And that will mean more barns to house them, I should think, won't it? Unfortunately, this whole site is visible from both Plumbers Plain and Hammer Pond Road as it lies like that between the two roads in a V shape. It's in a valley with a little stream along the bottom. So it stretches between the two roads. There's a clear view of all the buildings, the tons of chalk which have been imported to the site, and the general mess of mayhem, and you can see it from both sides. 6.8b in the report states it should result in substantial environmental improvement and reduce the impact on the countryside. This does not. I appreciate it replaces some old tumble down units, but it can hardly be considered like for like when this new building is 112 square metres larger than the buildings removed. I see it's to be clad in green. Well, it is green. I can see that. The biodigester was supposed to be green, but that's got a white roof, which has never been changed. I would like to draw attention to the fact that this applicant hardly ever applies for planning permission in the normal way. It's always build and do what I want and ask questions later. I ask members to just look at the number of applications here in this report. I understand there are currently 8 outstanding compliance issues on this site and a very large number of previous compliance cases raised with officers about this site. There is a history here. I have personally visited the applicant several times, and I always ask what he is trying to achieve, and I never get a straight answer. The other day, when I was passing by on the road, I saw a coach in the entrance, and so I'm now wondering if they're doing day trips for cows or something. I can't imagine why we'd have a coach in there. It's supposed to be a farm. So I propose this application is refused. And it would suit me quite well if they went to appeal and a planning inspector, a proper planning inspector, came up there and had a jolly good look round and see what's happening to a beautiful, what was a beautiful piece of countryside. Thank you. So I would propose that we refuse it.
Thank you very much. Would officers like to respond to any of those issues? Not yet. Not yet? Okay. In that case, do I have any other speakers on this? Councillor Vickers?
I just want to know what reasons Councillor Bradman wants it refused on.
Where should I start? Policy 10 of the HDP. Well, if I could just say, before I come to the reasons for refusal, it has come to my notice during the process of this planning committee over the years that certain people get asked to provide evidence of why they want it refused. Other councillors do not. I don't like to name names, but Councillor Ritchie over there had an application refused only a few months ago, and he didn't provide any reasons for it. The officers did. Anyway, I'll come back to what I was saying. Policy 10 of the HDPF, where it says it should contribute to a diverse and sustainable farming enterprise, it doesn't. So policy 10 is relevant. It's overdevelopment because the footprint is larger than that removed. I think policy 25 of the HDPF comes into play here too, as according to the Companies House, there is only one employee, and that is the applicant. Policy 26 of the HDPF, where it says support the needs of agriculture or forestry, this is neither. Also within policy 26, it says development will be considered acceptable, but it does not lead either individually or cumulatively to a considerable level of activity. And so I think those policies cover the reasons for review.
The officers like to respond to any of those issues?
Yeah. So based on that, the motion would be to refuse planning permission for probably 2 reasons. So the first reason would be along the lines of it has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the local planning authority that the development is essential to its countryside location and necessary to support the needs of agriculture, conscious of the relevant policies of HDPF. And the second reason would be that the proposal amounts to a harmful overdevelopment of the site, which is detrimental to the character and appearance of the locality, conscious policies 25 and 33, the HDPF.
Would you be agreeable to letting other members speak before we can come to your motion?
Yes, of course, Chairman.
Councillor Kitchen?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was only going to say I wholeheartedly second Councillor Bradnam's thing. I think it's been development into the countryside over many years now, and I entirely support her recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. So we have a seconder on that. Does anyone else want to? Councillor Fletcher?
I'd just like to ask the officers for comment on the suggestion that it's refused because of a lack of demonstrated need. To ask whether or not they feel that that is something that is going to be sustainable at appeal, or whether, and if they have some doubt, whether or not it would be wise to defer it in order to ask for more information from the applicant before we get the decision.
Clearly, officers have evidence from the applicant in terms of what the need for the building, but you've obviously heard from representations today in terms of perhaps an alternative view on that. My view is members should make a decision on the basis of the information, having considered all what you've heard today, or whatever that might be. You know, officers are recommending approval, but it's clear that there is an alternative view in the room, and it's difficult to say what will happen at appeal. I don't think it would be an unreasonable view of members to raise concerns, and I don't think there would be an award of costs, but whether we would be successful or not, it would be dependent on the inspector. But my view is members should proceed with a decision today. Thank you.
Okay, well, based on that, Councillor Bradnam, if we'll accept your motion to refuse and vote on that.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, seconded by Councillor Kitchen. Yeah. Okay, so the motion is.
Sorry, can I do point of order? In the discussions of this, I've got an interest that I've just discovered, so I'm going to abstain on that. I can talk to the legal officer about it afterwards, but just whilst in the debate, so that's why I'm not going to vote on it.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Okay, so we are voting to refuse. Do you want to repeat the grounds or on the two grounds?
Yes, so the first reason would be it has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the local planning authority that the development is essential to its countryside location and necessary to support the needs of agriculture. That'd be contrary to policies 10 and 26 of HDPF. And the second reason, which I think covers everything, was the proposal would amount to a harmful overdevelopment of the site, which would be detrimental to the character appearance of the site and wider surroundings, contrary to policies 25, 32 and 33 HDPF.
Thank you very much. All those in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. And any abstentions?
So just to advise you, we had 18 for, no against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, so the item is refused. And that's the end of it. Okay. Just waiting for Councillor Greening to return to the room. Okay, so moving on to item 10 on the agenda, which is DC 210738, land at 521-753-134-251 Old Ford Close, Faygate. If the officer would like to do a presentation first, thank you.
Thank you. This application relates to a parcel of land on the eastern side of Old Forge Close in Faygate. The site is surrounded by housing, but is separated from adjoining properties and land by fencing. Here are some photos of a site which is located between the detached garage and the two-storey house. So it's this section of land here. And this is the view of the interior of the site, where you can see the fencing from adjoining properties and the overgrown condition. The application proposes a detached bungalow with the footprint shown by the blue hatching. Faygate is an unclassified settlement, so for the purposes of the HDPF is considered to be a countryside location. Generally in countryside locations, new housing is resisted, but in this case, as the site is surrounded by housing and Faygate has been identified as a potential secondary settlement in the local plan review, coupled with the current 5-year housing supply position, it's considered that in this instance, the balance of the considerations is such that the principle of the house on the site is acceptable. And this is consistent with recent appeal decisions in Faygate, where inspectors have noted that the site reads as an urban settlement. It isn't the sites which are infilling existing street scenes don't affect the countryside, and therefore the principle can be supported. The proposed siting would reflect the southern neighbour, with off-street parking provided to the front and amenity space to the rear. The dwelling would comprise a modest bungalow, appreciably lower than surrounding properties. Whilst this would create a contrast, it's considered that no particular visual harm would result, with the proposed design approach acceptable in this instance. The top plan shows the relationship across the back of the proposed dwelling with the neighbouring building at number 1. And the scale of the bungalow and the retained separation from side boundaries is considered sufficient to ensure no unacceptable harm on neighbouring amenity. In terms of water neutrality, the application proposes water efficiencies at 2 existing properties within the district, with sufficient information provided to demonstrate existing consumption from these properties can be lowered to the extent the proposed dwelling would not increase water consumption across the 3 properties. This information has been reviewed by Natural England, who have raised no objection. In addition to the considerations set out in the report, it should be noted that consultation has taken place with the council's ecologist, as great crested newts are known to be present in the area. The ecologist has advised that it's unlikely, given the layout of the properties and the habitats present on the site, that great crested newts would be present, but conditions are recommended through condition 3 to secure mitigation of potential impact should great crested newts be present, with condition 4 seeking enhancement of biodiversity measures on the site. And this approach is sufficient to ensure our ecological requirements are met. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers on this item. The first speaker is Paul Percival, who is an objector, and you have 2 minutes.
I live directly next to the plot of land in question. I've lived in the estate for over 20 years. Originally, I think this application was over 2 years ago. The parish council objected en masse after we petitioned the parish council en masse, and there was about 20 people in attendance. It's gone on for so long recently, we weren't even aware it'd gone back through the parish council, so we couldn't petition, and we weren't even aware that this was happening. So it went through the parish council. I note that 10 objections were represented today, which is very interesting, because whilst this is not classed as a neighbourhood plan area, it's clear if it was, it wouldn't be approved. With 35 objections out of 34 houses with 25 separate dwellings, and 5 of those are renting, that percentage of objections is absolutely huge. This brings no benefits to us. And why do we need it? The planning document constantly reminding us of Horsham District's planning rules not being fully followed for policies 3 and 4 and would be considered unacceptable. It is recognised small sites are often built out relatively quickly. Well, I can tell you, when this small firm developed the houses behind, which was the other residents that you were talking about in the application, it's the same people, it took months and months and months because they run out of money. Your document states the land itself is considered to be limited environmental capacity. It's high environmental capacity to us because we pay and care for all those newts on that estate. We were devastated when the developers callously stripped the site back to piles of wood on one morning to avoid a newt survey, why are you not asking for a newt survey? Because I guarantee you the newts are there. Natural England clearly haven't been to site. We maintain the field next to 42, whose garden backs on directly. Everybody on the estate knows newts are present. The council website states the council has initiated a unique and an innovative partnership with the Wildlife Trust to enhance nature across Horsham. Its main objective is to develop the natural recovery, help wildlife thrive and increase awareness so communities can make local improvements. This isn't working with communities. It feels entirely driven to meet planning commitment. Is one more dwelling really going to make that much difference when thousands are being bought across Sussex? I respectfully ask the planning committee to leave what was a lovely garden as an area that can encourage nature so that we can manage the newts on the newt pond that we currently have.
Stop now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do understand. Very good.
The second speaker is Dave Fairbrother, and you also an objector, and you also have 2 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. Old Forge Close and Halls Drive were developed around 20 years ago by Try as an estate called the Ridings. Nothing was adopted by the council. All the services weren't adopted. A residents association, of which I'm a director, was put in place to manage the whole estate. The company is comprised only of the homeowners. At the time, the council put restrictions in place that are actually enforced through lifetime covenants in perpetuity on every house about the appearance. So surely any development must match the appearance. You put restrictions in place upon parking, and we're already running out of parking spaces. We haven't got enough. Every household has to pay for the upkeep of the roads, the pavements, the street lighting, the stormwater, and this development will mean more runoff because you're building on land that is garden. With landscaping, there are newts. We pay for the pond thousands of pounds to maintain it and to do newt surveys to prove there are newts. There are grass snakes and there are hedgehogs. There will be undoubtedly damage to the roadways, the extra traffic. The building will require heavy goods vehicles to come in. We will get damage. One house, as my colleague says, does not make a difference to the provision of housing across the borough. It makes an enormous difference to the 34 houses that I represent in that road, and there is no way this should go ahead. I object.
Thank you very much. And the final speaker is Doug Wright, who is speaking in support, and you also have 2 minutes.
Thank you. This application follows a previously withdrawn application. This application has therefore been designed to take into consideration and reflect the previous concerns of HDC and the residents of Faygate, with additional detail, design and supporting documents. The officer in their report, by recommending approval, provides a clear, well-considered and balanced assessment of the proposal. This application site represents a piece of garden land of Faygate Lane not sold to developers to build Old Forge Close and Halls Drive. As such, it is a natural site for a small infill development, which has been designed to reflect the character of the existing development within Old Forge Close through its architectural features and use of materials. The proposed dwelling would not appear cramped within the site and as such would not cause significant harm to the street scene. The layout of the site has been designed to ensure that it has sufficient separation distance between neighbouring dwellings, which along with the single-story nature of the proposed dwelling would limit overlooking or loss of privacy. The proposed dwelling would provide a sufficient level of on-site parking. The addition of one dwelling with an existing close would not intensify the use of the close, a point reiterated by the officer and West Sussex County Council. In terms of water neutrality, as set out in the officer's report, sufficient mitigation measures have been proposed and accepted by Natural England. In summary, the proposal has been demonstrated to provide a more efficient use of the land while serving the council's 5-year housing land supply. The principle of development is considered acceptable and further complies with the relevant policies in terms of housing needs, design, water neutrality and impact upon the surrounding area. It has also been demonstrated that the proposal poses no undue harm upon the neighbouring properties, given the significant separation distances and elements of design. It is therefore respectively requested that the application is approved as per officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Would officers like to come back on any of the points raised?
Yeah, just to pick up a couple of points, just to confirm that the planning permission wouldn't supersede any covenants which would be in place already on the site. And it would be essentially be a private matter of the applicant to make sure any other legal requirements are met before commencing development. And in terms of Great Crested Newts, again, condition 3 is a pre-commencement condition which secures the necessary details before anything can take place on site to prove there'd be no impact upon them. And I think that provides sufficient comfort that no harm to ecology would result. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I can go to the local members. So who would like to go first? Councillor Kitchen.
I'll go this time. This meeting's getting me very confused these days about water neutrality. It does seem to me that you can bypass it fairly simply. I just wonder, before I make any further comments, if you can reassure me as to how this is happening, because it does seem to be that we're making slightly random decisions.
Yes, I mean, the whole issue of water neutrality is to make sure development doesn't increase water consumption. So within that, it's, I think, one of the main approaches to do that is to offset increased consumption from a development by improving efficiencies in existing buildings. So if 2 existing dwellings consume X amount of water, and you can, retrofit it to improve tap flows, shower flows, remove baths or whatever, that then essentially creates an amount of water which you can use to facilitate new development taking place. So it's the same approach of the borehole. You're not then increasing water consumption, you're balancing it against existing consumption to make sure there's no increase within the district and within the North Sussex catchment area.
I personally find that quite hard to take on board, but I assume if you're saying so, that's what you mean. I think my concern, it is an infill site, and the problem is that the picture you flashed up there of the garden or the ground that it's going on, if I was a neighbour, I'd be very upset if I was missing that. But I think the one area that does concern me, there is no car parking on the road. I think you said there were 2 car parking spaces. 3. Okay, well, that's right, because, and I do also understand the local people who live there, their concerns about construction traffic. Is there any way that one could have something that's not any of these huge lorries that are floating around now? Because that is a private road and therefore possibly not built to the normal standards.
Yeah, we generally look to secure details of construction for construction environment management plan, which we haven't recommended in this application because it's a single dwelling essentially. But there's no reason if you felt it was necessary, it couldn't be added to the recommendation, should you wish. Yes.
But reluctantly, I believe it is an infill site. If we can sort those out, you can reassure about Parlor. I was
Thank you. Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, we have another application here that has over 30 objections from local residents. I guess my initial view when I see something like this, if it's not within the built-up area boundary, it's a countryside location, and my default is to say no. It's support the residents, support the people that want to object to it. But I listened to what the officers have said, and if this is considered a secondary settlement within our upcoming local plan, and if we have lost appeals in Kilmwood Vale, I need to take that on board. I also look at the objections from the former consultees, and we don't have any formal objections from the former consultees. So we're in a situation whereby the residents don't like it, but I'm struggling to find planning reasons to turn it down. So similar to my colleague, I think this is going to be something I'm going to reluctantly have to support unless there are other members in the room that can give me legal planning grounds that we can turn this down on. I would come back to my colleague's point on water neutrality. We have been briefed as members that you need to retrofit 6 houses to create enough water to build 1 house, and yet I read through the paper here and it tells me that they're planning on to retrofit 2 houses to build 1 house. Now that would seem illogical and against what I've been briefed as a member. So if I can just challenge that and get some crystal clarity on why this particular resident doesn't have to retrofit 6 houses when other developers are being asked to provide enough water for one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it basically all depends on the existing consumption within the houses to be retrofitted. So if you're using average figures for water consumption, the expectation is you need more properties to retrofit to balance it against new development. But in cases where there's a higher water use within those existing properties, and it can be evidence through bills to prove that there's a higher consumption than the average figure, we would expect there to be fewer properties that need to be offset and improved for efficiencies. So as long as they can evidence the existing water consumption is higher than the average, and that you can only do that through bills, it's quite possible that you can retrofit fewer properties than perhaps was expected originally. Yeah, so basically establishing the baseline use all comes down to the evidence provided, and ultimately that can only be provided through water bills.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other speakers? No. Okay, well, back to the local members, but you've just spoken, so I'm not sure you'll have anything to add. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can
Councillor
I
Wall.
just ask that you confirm that you can bring in something about the size of the construction traffic? Because that is serious concern in that area. You will add it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rick.
That's exactly my point, that the council did ask for the standard management plan condition to be included. And on that basis, I would then support this application.
Thank you very much. Okay, so recommendation is to approve subject to the management plan being added to the recommendations. So all those in favour of approval, please raise your hands. All against, please raise your hands. And any abstentions?
So the results are, there were 14 for, 1 against and 4 abstentions.
Thank you. Okay, it is resolved that this item is approved. We now move on to, everyone will be delighted, the last item of the day, which is item 11, DC 192464, Berkeley Homes Development Site, Worthing Road, Southwater. Would the officer like to start with the presentation? Thank you.
Hi there, good evening, members. Please note that since the agenda was published for this item, 2 objections from local residents have been received and they raise issue about environmental impacts. Sorry, I have 2 further objections from residents since the agenda has been published, and they raise concern broadly about environmental issues. So this proposal is the 5th and final phase of the strategic allocation west to Southwater, and that's shown red on the slide, and that's known as Broadacres. So members resolved to approve this application back in September 2020, and that was in accordance with the officer recommendation and subject to the completion of a legal agreement. So the application's returned to committee due to the new material consideration of water neutrality. So when the council received the National England position statement, the legal agreement hadn't reached engrossment, so permission wasn't issued. So a water neutrality strategy is now being done, and the approach is to adopt water efficiencies within the phase 5 scheme
and that secures a water consumption of 89 litres per person per day. So that leaves 20,020 litres to offset. So it's proposed to offset on the developer's existing consented but unbuilt developments in the district. So that's the earlier phase, phase 4 of Broadacres, and phases 8 and 13 of Highwood. Those are the areas shown on the slides, coloured yellow, pink. So the water efficiencies of the 461 unbuilt homes at these sites, that's Broadacres phase 4 and the Highwood phases, will also be improved, and they will also meet the 89.8 litres per person per dwelling. And that will allow total savings of 20,965 litres per day. So the important thing to know between those two figures is that's a really high excess headroom, about 945 litres per day. And that allows for irregularities in use. So when a homeowner wants to fill the paddling pool up, wash their car, clean their patio, it evens out the high level users across the development because of this number of dwellings involved, but also the excess headroom is so high. So that's why we as officers feel the strategy provides sufficient certainty for the high bar that's needed to meet habitats regs. And it has the endorsement of Natural England. So having accounted for water neutrality and all the other material considerations that are raised in this October's committee report, we recommend the application be approved.
Thank you very much. Now, both the local members have left, I believe, or aren't here. I believe Ian Stannard left a statement with somebody. No? Oh, okay. I'm misinformed. In that case, do we have any speakers? Councillor Greening.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments on the application brief because I'm going to talk. You'll understand why in a second. I don't accept, because if you look at what Barclays want to do, the baths are 130 litres, and an average household bath can fill up to 300 litres. So that's what we're talking about here in water saving measures. The shower is 7 litres a minute, and then an average shower in a normal house now is 12 litres a minute. Taps 3 litres a minute in a normal house is 10 or 15. So that's what we're talking about here. So you can spend £600,000 on a house, but water comes as extra. Yeah, and apologies for being late. I came back from Birmingham and thought I'd cheer myself up by coming to talk about Berkeley Homes. What I'm going to say now, though, is important. And I've taken legal advice on this from the monitoring officer, so I'm just going to get it right what I've said. I've taken the opportunity to read the water neutrality legal advice on 2 occasions. The last occasion being very recently last week. The access of the advice was facilitated by the head of legal, Sharon Evans. With regard to the officer report in front of us, I'm obviously not a legal expert, there are some around the table. But having read the advice, and I won't be specific for obvious reasons whilst we're in a public meeting, the way I interpret it, our legal advice doesn't give me clarity to make a decision on this. And I realise that discussion on specific advice would have to be done under an exempt session, but without clarification on that legal advice, which is not possible at the moment. And I would urge all members to read that legal advice. It's really important, and it talks about a specific measure within this application. I don't feel able to make a decision on it, so I believe we should defer it to read the legal advice in consultation with the local members, Councillor Vickers and myself, and the ward members, along with the chair and vice chair of planning. I would stress to all members to read this piece of legal advice is absolutely vital. And when I read it, it changed my opinion of this application in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the internal officer like to come back on that? Yeah.
We, as members know, we did seek various pieces of legal advice on water neutrality, but we haven't done so for some reasonable period of time, and obviously things evolve. I cannot comment on that particular advice because I haven't read it for some time. But what we do know is that Natural England support this application and the proposal of offsetting. And my colleague can comment further in terms of how it will work in practice in terms of the triggers to ensure the level of certainty that the efficiencies are provided before the new development commences. But so officers are confident with the proposal. Yes, we did seek legal advice, but you know, that was many months ago, and we've been working closely with Natural England, who are now commenting on our applications, and obviously there was some difficulty with that initially. So we're confident in where we are. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. It was news to me that there was some concern about the legal advice. Is there any harm in deferring it for one meeting, just so that we can have a quick look at it? I was going to make some comments about the application in detail, but if we're going to defer it, it doesn't seem relevant. We can do it next time.
That is open to members, but I maintain of the view that we've received no objections from Natural England, which you know, it is really the key pieces of advice we need in terms of water neutrality. Yes, we are the competent authority, and we can take a different view if we wish. I don't think we would want to do that, but Natural England support it, and officers are confident in the view. It is open to members to defer it. That is up to you. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm not suggesting we refuse the application. All I'm suggesting is that we just stop this, bring it back to the next one.
Councillor Green, can I just confirm the legal advice you're talking about? Is that are you saying that's from Natural England?
No, it's from our own council.
Our own?
Yes, it's our own council's legal advice, which I've read. And obviously I won't go into particulars in a public meeting, but I don't have confidence in my ability or other councillors without reading that advice to make such a decision based on the report in front of us. And I would stress, if you've not read the legal advice, to go and do so.
Councillor Fletcher?
I'd like to ask whether we could have clarification from Councillor Greening as to whether he considers this critical piece of legal advice relates specifically to this application or relates to all water neutrality decisions that we're considering, and also to ask the officers why, if this piece of advice is so critical, it's not possible for Councillor Greening to read it out in an exempt session right now.
Councillor Greening?
When I read the legal advice, I didn't take notes. It's very, you read it in front of you, so I couldn't quote it verbatim at the moment. However, I mean, if we wanted to get the legal advice, I'm sure we could do that under an exempt session. Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, what was your first question? I've answered your second one, but not your first.
Whether this is related
critical to yes, it's to all. We've got this piece, the paragraph that I read, I believe, and I'm not a legal expert, but for the layperson, would be very important in terms of our strategy to mitigate against water neutrality for all applications.
In which case, I don't understand why you've waited until the last item on the agenda to raise this, because previous items have also been turning on decisions of water neutrality.
They're not, and I don't want to be specific, they're not talking about doing, there's a specific issue, and it's not been relevant. This specific strategy has not been relevant to the others, but the overall, in terms of strategic sites, so I'm getting the model. But I would have raised it obviously if I thought it was relevant on others. Yeah, sorry.
May I interject, because I might be able to help? Unfortunately, I haven't seen the legal advice that Councillor Greening is referring to. However, I understand that advice was obtained months ago when the water neutrality issue first arose in the council, which was, I believe, last September. In the time since we've obtained various legal advices from council, the matter of water neutrality and how to address it has moved on, which is why this application has been brought to the committee, because the measures that have been proposed have been put before Natural England, who have said that they support the measures. So bearing that in mind, obviously it's a decision for you as a committee to decide whether you feel that the matter should be deferred to look at legal advice. But I must stress that that legal advice is an old piece of advice. And the measures being proposed are being supported by Natural England.
Thank you. I'll allow Councillor Vickers back.
Would it be helpful to delegate this for approval subject to the local members being satisfied that the legal advice is sound? Between the local members and between Councillor Greening and myself, but there are a number of issues, if we're going to do that, that I wanted to raise as points of interest on the actual application.
Can I just confirm that Councillor Greening, you'd be amenable to that suggestion, and then we'll go back.
Point of order. Could we just clarify whether that is in order to defer in consultation with members other than the local member, because that's the first time that this has been suggested since I've been on this committee, as far as I know. It's always been deferred in consultation with the local member rather than some other member.
I can comment, if that's okay. It's up to members who you choose to defer it to. If you wish to add names on it, it's up to you as decision makers. But in terms of Councillor Vickers' suggestion, whilst my preference is obviously to proceed with the decision, given Councillor Greening is suggesting this is fundamental to the assessment of the application, I would suggest members either proceed with the decision on the basis of the officer's advice, bearing in mind that the legal advice is some time was provided many months ago and Natural England have raised no objections, or you defer it. I wouldn't suggest we delegate it subject to an issue that may, in your view, be critical to your decision. Thank you.
In which case, I'm happy to second Councillor Greening's proposal to defer this and bring it back.
Very well. You've got a seconder, so will you be amenable to some other speakers first before we vote? Thank you. Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've had so many water neutrality things tonight that we've been going backwards and forwards, and there's a decision here, decision there. I'm massively confused. And I go back to what Liz said, is that I'm just really unsure on what we can and can't do and what the new legislation is. And I trust Billy, Councillor Greening, sorry, that there's enough concern there that we should just take stock and maybe as a consequence of this meeting, just circulate, if you can, what that legal is, or reiterate it, underline it, so we can actually make a balanced decision on up-to-date information, because I am not prepared to vote on this one tonight, to be perfectly honest, because I generally don't understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Landau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I'm gathering this evening, it seems that Natural England have softened their attitude to water neutrality, because this particular, when it started, if you were to build something, there should be no more water coming out of Horsham than there was before you built it. There's 80 homes here going to be pulling out 60 litres a day. That's water coming out of Horsham. So, you know, what is going on with this water neutrality?
Would officers like to reply to that?
If I can comment, Natural England have no way in any shape or form softened their view on this. What has happened is we've been managing water neutrality for a whole year now. Developers have taken some considerable time to find solutions, and that is what we are finding before you. After a considerable period of time, developers are bringing forward solutions which Natural England and us as officers consider to be acceptable. I do know, obviously, the the comments in the room about the items on the agenda, and perhaps that's a conversation about some further information that could be provided in terms of water neutrality more generally. But Natural England have not softened their view. We've not changed our position on water neutrality. Developers are now finding solutions that meet the requirements of water neutrality. Thank you.
I would also just add for completeness that Natural England did initially object to this scheme, but we worked together to find a solution. The issue they had was the use of the water butts, which have now been excluded from the water calculations. So if anything, it's gone through a rigorous scrutiny via Natural England. They haven't changed their position. And this, in my experience so far, dealing with the larger schemes, is the most straightforward strategy that's been put forward to us. It doesn't involve a third party asset offsetting. It's contained within the developer, which makes all of the mechanisms of control and certainty embedded in the conditions and the legal agreement much more robust for us to have a more confident position to say that it does meet the habitat regs, and Natural England have agreed that.
Thank you. And I'll just say that myself, having studied all these applications beforehand, I think they do make sense. But what's going on is they're applications that are coming forward because they have some form of offsetting or mitigation with another site that they own. That's the distinction, and that's all of these sites have that in common. They've got different. Well, the Borehole one is different again. They've all got special ways of doing it. So it's not all sites coming forward. They are ones for a particular reason. But it is really complicated. Councillor Boffey.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no issue with deferring this one if it's going to help the process. And I would note that I realise this one is for hundreds of houses, and the application that this committee just approved a few minutes ago, immediately before this one, was only for one house. But that did actually have offsetting in it. I seem to remember quite detailed questions about how that offsetting works. So I think we ought to be mindful of that, and whether anything that comes to light that has bearing on this application has any bearing on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, so there is an offsetting. So in this scheme, it's retrofitting 5 homes for one because of the water efficiency calculations. What's significant with this application in the way that they've approached the water efficiencies, it allows such a significant headroom of 945 litres per day. So whereas you have this issue about, well, some homeowners will use more water than others externally, but also internally, or they might want to change their shower head because of low flow, that 945 allows for that. It's so generous because of the efficiencies they've been able to put into all of the 461 properties. So that's why they reliant on this number of homes to do the 1:5 ratio.
Thank you. Councillor Hewton.
Can I just say I agree with Councillor Minto. I'm thoroughly confused. We've also been going for 3.25 hours. I think we're all massively tired, and I think it's a good idea to defer it anyway, so I'm up for that.
Do we have any other speakers? Otherwise, we'll go back to the motion to defer. Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Green, yeah, okay. And that was seconded by someone I've forgotten. Councillor Vickers. Okay, so we'll vote on that. So the motion is to defer to consider water neutrality with reference to Councillor Greening, Councillor Vickers, myself, and the relevant officers. Oh, sorry, deferred meeting. Sorry, deferred. Yeah. Yeah, just deferred. Yes, sorry. Yeah, it's been a long day. Okay. So,
and can we add to that we're going to be provided some information to?
Well, it's just deferring to the next meeting.
Yeah. No, but before the next meeting, can we have more clarification about this whole situation so we don't have the same thing again. Yeah, no, that's fine, but maybe point us in the right direction. And
can we go to the vote, please? So all those in favour of deferral, raise your hands. And all those against? Any abstentions?
So the motion will be deferred because we have 15 for, 5 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Just members quickly, just to vote in terms of the comments made regarding the legal advice. The legal advice is open to all members to view. It's not something we'll circulate given the confidential nature of it, but you can make an appointment, as some members have, with a monitoring officer to read it in the council offices. So if you wish to do so, please do, and obviously I will review it again. In terms of the point about some further learning on water neutrality, I'll take that away and we'll consider how best to do that to further inform you for future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was agenda item 11, which are 10, which was any urgent business. There is none. Meeting is concluded. Thank you.